Welcome to Sleepy Time Stories. Hello, my dear friends. You might think the cleanest people in ancient Egypt were the pharaohs, but their idea of clean was far more unsettling than you'd expect. Beneath layers of perfume, oils, and perfect white linen, something very different was quietly building over time. What looked like purity was often just careful concealment repeated day after day until no one questioned it anymore. The more you look closely, the more that flawless image begins to feel strangely artificial. Tonight, step inside this hidden world and see what was really beneath the surface. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soothing background, and let's embark on this journey together tonight. If you were allowed to stand quietly inside the private quarters of an Egyptian pharaoh at the start of the day, what you would witness would not feel like a simple act of washing, but something far more controlled and deliberate. The air would already be prepared before he arrived. Bowls of water, jars of oil, clean linen, and polished tools would be arranged with careful precision. Servants would stand in silence, each one knowing exactly what their role was, each one ready to correct even the smallest imperfection before it could be seen. From the outside, it would appear that this was the cleanest space imaginable, a place untouched by disorder, where everything existed to support the image of perfection. The pharaoh himself would enter, not as a man preparing for the day, but as a figure that needed to be completed. His body was not treated as something natural, but as something that had to be shaped into a symbol. Every movement around him was designed to remove anything that could suggest weakness, discomfort, or humanity. His skin had to appear smooth, his scent controlled, his posture exact. Cleanness was not about removing dirt. It was about removing evidence that he was human at all. This expectation changed the meaning of every action. Washing was no longer about comfort. It became a ritual of correction. Water was poured over the body, not simply to clean, but to prepare the surface for what came next. Oils were applied in measured layers, creating a sheen that reflected light in a controlled way. Linen was pressed against the skin, not just to dry it, but to ensure that no mark remained. The process was slow, repeated, and watched carefully. Nothing was left to chance. At first, nothing was left to chance. At first, this might seem like an advanced form of hygiene. A ruler who bathed regularly, who maintained his appearance, who surrounded himself with order and cleanliness, could easily be seen as someone who understood the importance of health. But that assumption quickly begins to fall apart. When the purpose becomes clear, none of these actions was meant to improve the condition of the body. They were meant to improve the image of the body. The difference is subtle, but it changes everything. A body that looks clean is not always a body that is healthy. A surface that appears smooth can hide irritation underneath. The pharaoh's routines focused entirely on what could be seen. If the skin shone under light, then the ritual was successful. If the scent was masked by oils and perfumes, then nothing else mattered. What could not be seen was ignored. The environment itself made this even more complicated. The Egyptian climate was unforgiving. Heat settled on the skin and stayed there. Dust moved easily through open spaces and clung to anything it touched. Oils that were meant to improve appearance often trapped that dust against the body, creating layers that were difficult to remove completely. Over time, these layers built up, turning what was meant to be cleansing into something that quietly caused discomfort. Servants continued the process without question. Their role was not to judge the effectiveness of the ritual, but to maintain it exactly as it had always been done. Each step had meaning tied to belief and tradition. To change the method would be to challenge something far larger than hygiene. It would mean questioning the idea that the pharaoh was something more than human. That was not allowed. This created a strange situation where the person most affected by these routines had the least control over them. The pharaoh did not adjust the process based on how his body felt. He followed what was expected. The servants followed what they had been taught. The system moved forward without reflection, repeating itself day after day, unchanged. Clothing reinforced this illusion further. Fresh linen was brought in regularly, bright and carefully maintained. The fabric created a visible layer of purity, separating the pharaoh from the world around him. But beneath that fabric, the reality could be very different. Skin that looked smooth from a distance might be irritated from constant treatment. Areas that were hidden from view did not receive the same attention. The focus remained on what others could see. It is difficult not to feel a sense of unease when imagining this scene closely. The room appears clean. The body appears perfect. Everything suggests control and order. Yet beneath that surface, there is tension. The body is being shaped, managed, and corrected continuously, not for its own benefit, but for the sake of an image that must never break. If we come to as half compare this to modern life, it would be like maintaining a flawless appearance in front of a camera, while ignoring what is happening beneath the surface. The lighting is correct. The skin looks smooth. The image is convincing. But the reality behind it is different. The difference is that today we understand that gap. For the pharaoh, that gap was the entire system. The belief that appearance defined truth made it possible for this contradiction to exist without question. If the pharaoh looked clean, then he was clean. If he appeared perfect, then he was perfect. There was no need to look deeper. The illusion was strong enough to replace reality. What makes this more unsettling is how normal it all was. No one inside that room would have seen anything unusual. The routines were familiar. The results were expected. The idea that something might be wrong did not arise because the system itself defined what was right. Cleanliness had been redefined to mean something entirely different. Over time, this approach pushed the body further away from its natural state. Each attempt to maintain perfection required more control, more precision, and more intervention. The rituals became more demanding, more exact, and less forgiving. What began as a way to present an image slowly became a system that the body had to endure. The pharaoh's daily rituals created a surface that looked flawless, but beneath that surface the body was being controlled rather than cared for. The need to maintain that illusion pushed these practices further, turning simple acts of cleanliness into something far more extreme. Soon that same pursuit of purity would demand that every trace of the natural body be removed as sharp blades scraped across skin again and again, leaving behind wounds that no one was allowed to acknowledge. The removal of hair was not treated as a small detail, but as a necessary step. In maintaining the image of purity that surrounded the pharaoh, before oils were applied and before fine linen touched the skin, the body had to be reduced to a smooth surface, with nothing left to disrupt the illusion. Servants approached with tools that had already been prepared, blades sharpened carefully, not for comfort, but for efficiency. Every part of the body was included in this process, and nothing was considered too minor to ignore. Hair in this context was not seen as natural. It was seen as something that introduced disorder. It broke the smoothness of the skin and suggested a connection to the ordinary human condition. For a figure who was meant to appear closer to a god than a man, this was unacceptable. So the solution was simple and absolute. It had to be removed entirely, and it had to be removed often. The act itself followed a routine that left little room for variation. The blades, often made of copper or shaped from sharpened stone, were pressed directly against the skin and drawn slowly across it. Each movement required attention. A mistake could leave a visible mark, and a visible mark would disrupt the appearance that had to be maintained. Servants worked methodically, repeating the same motions across the body, ensuring that no trace remained. From a distance, the result appeared controlled and precise. The skin reflected light evenly. There were no interruptions, no uneven patches, no signs of natural growth. The body looked complete, as though it had been shaped intentionally rather than grown. This was the image that others were meant to see, and it was convincing enough to hold. But the process that created this image was far less controlled than it appeared. The tools were sharp, but they were not gentle. The skin, especially when treated repeatedly, became more sensitive over time. Areas that were shaved frequently could develop irritation that was not immediately visible. Small cuts were almost unavoidable. particularly when the routine was performed day after day without pause. There was no concept of preventing infection in the way we understand it now. The blades could be wiped, but they were not sterilized. In a climate where heat encouraged the growth of bacteria, even a minor break in the skin could become a source of deeper problems. Yet, these risks were not part of the consideration. The focus remained on the surface, on what could be seen, not on what might develop later. Servants continued the process without hesitation. Their role was not to question the method, but to execute it perfectly. The pharaoh was expected to remain still, to show no reaction, to maintain control over his body, even as it was being scraped and shaped. Any sign of discomfort would have disrupted the illusion that he existed above ordinary experience, so the ritual continued in silence, steady and uninterrupted. Over time, the repetition created a cycle that was difficult to escape. The more frequently the hair was removed, the faster it seemed to return. The faster it returned, the more often it had to be removed again. There was no point at which the process could stop. It became a constant requirement, something that had to be done before anything else could begin. It is difficult not to feel a sense of unease when imagining this routine closely. The room would appear calm. The movements would seem controlled. Everything would give the impression of order. But just beneath that surface, the body was being subjected to repeated friction, repeated pressure, repeated exposure. The skin was not allowed to rest. It was not allowed to rest. It was not allowed to recover fully before the process began again. If we compare this to modern habits, it would be like shaving the entire body every single day with tools that are not designed to protect the skin, ignoring every sign of irritation and continuing simply because the result looks better for a moment. The difference is that today such a practice would quickly be recognized as harmful. For the pharaoh, it was seen as necessary. The belief that drove this ritual was stronger than any physical consequence. Cleanliness was not defined by comfort or by the absence of harm. It was defined by appearance and by tradition. A smooth surface meant purity. Purity meant control. And control reinforced the idea that the pharaoh was something more than human. This belief allowed the consequences to remain hidden. Cuts could be covered with oil. Redness could be concealed under linen. The surface could be restored quickly enough that no one looking from the outside would notice what had happened. The illusion remained intact, even as the body beneath it experienced the effects of constant correction. The more the body was forced into this state, the more it depended on the ritual to maintain the appearance. Any pause would allow the natural state to return, and that was not acceptable. So the process continued, repeated without question, reinforced by belief, and carried out with precision. What makes this even more unsettling is how completely it was accepted. No one in the room would have considered this excessive. It was simply part of the routine, something that had always been done and would continue to be done. The idea that the body might be harmed in the process was not part of the conversation. The pharaoh's skin, when seen from a distance, appeared flawless. It reflected light. It matched the image. It supported the illusion. But that surface was the result of constant renewal, constant pressure, and constant repetition. It was not natural. It was maintained through a process that quietly ignored the limits of the body. The smooth surface of the pharaoh's ski. Nin was created through daily scraping that left behind small wounds hidden beneath oils and linen. That same skin, already weakened and exposed, would soon be covered again in thick layers of perfumed substances, meant to mask what could not be removed. As those oils settled into every cut and pore, they would begin to trap heat, dust, and decay directly against the body, turning the idea of cleanliness into something far more suffocating than it appeared. The application of oils came immediately after the body had been stripped down to its smooth surface, as if the skin, now cleared of everything natural, needed to be sealed again before it could be presented. Servants moved forward with small containers, each filled with thick, fragrant substances prepared in advance. These oils were not used sparingly. They were applied in deliberate layers spread carefully across the skin until they carried a visible sheen. From a distance, the result appeared refined and controlled, a surface that reflected light and suggested cleanliness. But the purpose of these oils was not what it seemed. The Egyptian climate made the body difficult to manage. Heat settled to the skin and stayed there, especially in enclosed spaces where air did not move freely. Even after washing, the body would begin to produce scent again, not because it was unclean, but because it was unclean, but because it was alive. This natural process was not accepted. Any trace of bodily odor risked breaking the illusion that the pharaoh existed beyond ordinary human limits. So instead of addressing the cause, the response focused on covering it. The oils were chosen for their strength. Their fragrance had to be noticeable enough to replace whatever the body might produce. Once applied, they formed a continuous layer across the skin, blending into the surface created by earlier rituals. The body did not smell like itself anymore. It carried the scent of the oils, a constructed identity that replaced the natural one. At first, this might seem effective. The stronger scent dominated, masking anything beneath it. The illusion held to anyone nearby. The pharaoh would appear not only clean but almost artificial in his presence, surrounded by a controlled and consistent fragrance. But this control came at a cost that was not immediately visible. The oils did not disappear after they were applied. They remained on the skin, mixing with heat, with dust, and with whatever the body continued to produce underneath. Over time, they began to accumulate. Each new layer settled over the last, creating a coating that grew thicker with repetition. The surface might still appear smooth, but it was no longer as clean as it seemed. Pores that had already been stressed by constant shaving were now covered by these dense substances. The skin, unable to breathe as it naturally would, began to react. Irritation could develop slowly, hidden beneath the sheen. Areas that appeared polished from a distance might feel heavy, uncomfortable, or sensitive, but these sensations were not the concern. The appearance remained unchanged, and that was enough. Servants continued the process without interruption. Their task was to maintain the layer, not to question its effects. If the fragrance faded, more oil was added. If the shine dulled, another layer was applied. The goal was consistency, not balance. The body became a surface that needed constant adjustment, always corrected to match the expected image. It is difficult not to feel a sense of tension when imagining how this would have felt over time. The skin, already exposed from repeated shaving, was now covered in substances that trapped heat against it. The environment added to this pressure. Dust moved through the air, settling into the oil, clinging to the surface in ways that not be easily removed without starting the entire process again. The body was not just coated, it was layered. If we compare this to modern habits, it would be like applying thick creams and perfumes over skin that is already irritated. Not to improve its condition, but to hide what is happening underneath. The surface might look better for a moment, but the underlying issue continues slowly becoming worse. The difference is that today, such a routine would be adjusted or stopped. For the pharaoh, it was repeated. The belief behind this practice reinforced the cycle. Fragrance was associated with purity. A body that smelled pleasant was considered clean, regardless of what was actually happening on the skin. This belief allowed the accumulation to continue without concern. As long as the scent remained strong, the ritual was seen as successful. The contradiction between appearance and reality grew with each layer. The more the oils were applied, the more they masked the natural signals of the body. Discomfort became easier to ignore. Signs of irritation were covered quickly. The surface was restored again and again, each time reinforcing the illusion that everything was under control. Over time, the body adapted in ways that were not always visible. Areas that were constantly coated could become more sensitive. The skin might react to the repeated application, but those reactions were rarely allowed to interrupt the routine. The process did not change. It continued, guided by tradition and expectation. Guided by tradition and expectation. What makes this even more unsettling is how completely this system replaced the idea of natural cleanliness. The body was no longer allowed to exist in its original state. It had to be altered, covered, and controlled continuously. The scent of the oils became more important than the condition of the skin itself. From the outside, everything still appeared perfect. The set pharaoh moved through spaces surrounded by a consistent fragrance, his skin reflecting light, his presence controlled and composed. Nothing in that image suggested discomfort or imbalance. The illusion remained intact, supported by layers that concealed more than they revealed. The longer this continued, the more dependent the body became on the ritual. Removing the oils completely would expose what had been hidden. That possibility was avoided. It was easier to continue adding layers than to confront what lay beneath them. The system sustained itself through repetition. The skin, treated as a surface to be managed, carried the weight of these decisions. It was cleaned, stripped, covered, and corrected, not for its own sake, but for the sake of what others needed to see. The body became secondary to the image it was required to present. The pharaoh's scent was carefully constructed through layers of oil that masked the natural signals of the body, while quietly trapping heat, dust, and irritation beneath the surface. This heavy coating did not clean the skin, but sealed everything into it, allowing problems to build slowly out of sight. Soon that same mixture would be placed in solid form directly onto the head, where heat would melt it down across the scalp and face, turning fragrance into something that clung, dripped, and could not be escaped. A final element was placed not on the skin but above it, carefully positioned on the head as a visible extension of the ritual. Servants carried small cones of scented wax, shaped with precision, smooth and pale, designed to appear decorative rather than functional. These cones were set gently on top of the pharaoh's head or secured into the layers of a wig, completing the presentation that had already been built through washing, shaving, and oiling. From a distance, they appeared controlled and refined, as if they were simply rarity of an elaborate aesthetic, rather than something that would soon begin to change. The intention behind these cones was straightforward. They were meant to release fragrance slowly over time, ensuring that the pharaoh remained surrounded by a constant controlled scent during ceremonies. In enclosed spaces where the air was heavy and movement was limited, this method seemed effective. Instead of repeatedly applying oils, the wax would soften gradually, releasing its scent in a steady way. The ritual appeared efficient, measured, and carefully designed to maintain the illusion of purity without interruption. At first, everything remained stable. The wax held its form. The surface stayed intact. The fragrance was present, but contained. The pharaoh could sit or stand without any visible change to the structure on his head. The image was complete, and the ritual seemed to function exactly as intended. But the environment did not remain unchanged. Heat gathered slowly, almost unnoticed at first. The body itself produced warmth, especially beneath layers of linen and oil. The surrounding air, already thick, held that warmth in place. As time passed, the wax began to respond. Its surface softened, losing the firmness that had defined its shape. The edges became less distinct, the structure less stable. What had been solid began to shift. This transformation did not happen suddenly. It was gradual, subtle, almost easy to ignore in the beginning. But as the wax continued to warm, it could no longer hold its form. It began to move downward, following the natural lines of the head. It seeped into the hair, into the woven strands of wigs, and eventually reached the skin beneath. From a distance, this change was not immediately obvious. The scent grew stronger, spreading through the air, reinforcing the impression that the ritual was working. The fragrance filled the space, becoming more noticeable, more dominant. This was the desired effect, but beneath that layer of scent, the material itself was no longer controlled. As the wax continued to soften, it began to drip. Thin streams formed, moving slowly across the scalp and toward the edges of the face. It mixed with the oils that had already been applied, creating a thicker substance that clung to the skin. The surface that had been carefully prepared was now covered again, not with a smooth layer, but with something that shifted and spread over time. The sensation would have been difficult to ignore, warm, persistent, and heavy. The melted wax did not disappear. It stayed where it settled, collecting along the hairline, around the temples, and along the neck. Yet the pharaoh remained still. The ritual demanded control. The ritual demanded control. Any sign of discomfort would have disrupted the image that had been constructed so carefully. Servants did not immediately intervene. The melting was expected. It was part of the process, not a failure of it. The release of fragrance was considered a success. Even if the physical experience of the body suggested otherwise, the focus remained on the scent, on the presence it created. Not on the presence it created, not on what the body was enduring beneath it. Over time, the mixture of wax, oil, and dust created a layer that was difficult to remove. It adhered to both hair and skin, binding to the surfaces it touched. What had started as a clean, solid object became something heavier, something that remained even after the ceremony ended. The body carried it beyond the moment it was meant for. If we compare this to modern experience, it would be like placing a thick, perfumed substance on the head and allowing it to melt slowly under heat, knowing that it will spread across the skin and remain there without being wiped away. Today, such a situation would be uncomfortable enough to stop. In this setting, it can true. Endued without interruption, the belief behind the ritual made it possible to ignore what was happening. Fragrance was associated with purity and divine presence. The stronger the scent, the more successful the ritual appeared. The visible effects of melting was secondary. They did not challenge the meaning of the act, because the meaning had already been defined. This created a quiet contradiction. The body was presented as controlled and perfect, yet it was covered in substances that moved and accumulated in ways that could not be fully controlled. From a distance, everything remained convincing. Up close, the experience was far more complicated. The longer the ceremony lasted, the more the material changed. What began as a stable form became something that spread across the head and down toward the body. The process could not be reversed at the moment. It had to be endured until it settled. The pharaoh remained composed, maintaining the stillness that was expected even as the substance continued to shift. What makes this especially unsettling is how normal it would have seemed. Those present would not have reacted. They had seen it before. They understood it as part of the ritual. The melting wax was not considered unusual. It was simply part of what happened when the ritual was performed, as it always had been. The body once again was not the focus. The image was the scent, the appearance, the impression created in the eyes of others. All of these elements mattered more than the physical reality beneath them. The ritual achieved its purpose even if the process introduced discomfort that could not be acknowledged. The scented wax began as a symbol of control and refinement, but under heat, it became a slow-moving layer that spread across the head and skin, mixing with oils and trapping everything it touched. This transformation turned fragrance into something that and remained long after the ritual ended, sealing the surface rather than cleansing it. What followed was even more deceptive, as the very water used for constant bathing carried unseen parasites that would press directly into already exposed skin. Water was used constantly, not as a luxury, but as a requirement that framed the entire idea of cleanliness around the pharaoh. Bowls were filled, basins were arranged, and servants moved in a steady rhythm, pouring water over the body in repeated cycles. From a distance, this routine suggested discipline and care. A ruler who bathed often, who maintained such visible order, appeared to exist in a state of purity that others could only admire. The act of washing seemed simple, direct, and effective. The source of this water, however, was never far away. The Nile provided what was needed for daily life, and its presence shaped every ritual that depended on it. It flowed steadily, carrying silt, organic matter, and unseen life through its currents. To those who depended on it, the river was both essential and unquestioned. It was used for drinking, for cleaning, and for sustaining the entire structure of society. Its role was so central that its condition was rarely examined beyond what could be seen. When water was brought into the pharaoh's chambers, it did not arrive as something refined or altered in any meaningful way. It was carried, stored, and poured with care, but its contents remained the same. From the outside, it looked clear enough. It moved easily across the skin, removing visible dust and residue from earlier rituals. In that sense, it fulfilled its purpose. The surface of the body appeared refreshed, renewed, ready to be presented again. But what could not be seen was left untouched by these actions. The water carried more than what the eye could detect. Fine particles settled into it, and microscopic organisms moved within it unnoticed. When it touched the skin, it did not simply remove, it also delivered. Each rinse, each pour brought the body into direct contact with elements that were not part of the intended ritual. The frequency of bathing only increased this exposure. The more often the body was washed, the more often it encountered the same source. What appeared to be a method of maintaining cleanliness became a repeated interaction with something that carried its own risks. The surface improved, but the underlying condition could quietly shift in another direction. Servants followed the routine without hesitation. Water was poured again and again, moving from shoulders to arms, from chest to legs, covering every part that had been prepared earlier. The process was consistent, predictable, and uninterrupted. There was no pause to question whether the water itself contributed to what it was meant to prevent. The ritual defined the outcome. If the body looked clean, then the process was considered successful. It is difficult not to feel a sense of contradiction when imagining this scene closely. The room is controlled. The movements are precise. The water flows in measured amounts. Everything suggests a system designed for care. Yet within that system, the body is being exposed repeatedly to something that is not entirely clean. The act of washing becomes both a solution and a source of new problems. The skin, already affected by earlier steps, responded to this contact in ways that were not always visible. Small abrasions from shaving created entry points that could not be seen from a distance. Oils applied afterward could seal the surface, trapping what had been introduced. The combination of these elements created a situation where the ritual of cleansing did not always lead to the condition it promised. If we compare this to modern experience, it would be like washing repeatedly with water that appears clear but carries hidden contaminants, trusting the process because it looks correct even as the effects accumulate slowly. Today, such a risk would be identified and corrected. In this setting, it remained part of the routine. The belief that supported this practice was simple: water cleans. That idea was strong enough to override any doubt. The visible result reinforced the belief the body looked better after washing, and that was enough to confirm that the method worked. There was no reason to look deeper because nothing on the surface suggested a problem. Over time, this created a cycle that was difficult to recognize from within. The body was washed frequently to maintain purity. The water introduced elements that could affect the body. The body was then treated again to restore its appearance. Each step reinforced the next, creating a system that sustained itself without question. The more often the ritual was performed, the more it became part of what defined cleanliness itself. A body that was washed repeatedly was considered clean, regardless of what the process might introduce. The repetition became proof, the appearance became evidence. The reality beneath that appearance remained unexamined. What makes this particularly unsettling is how complete the illusion was. The pharaoh, surrounded by order and ritual, appeared untouched by the conditions that affected others. His environment was controlled, his routines precise, his presence consistent. Nothing in that image suggested exposure or risk. The system was designed to prevent that impression. And yet, the connection to the river remained constant. Every drop of water carried with it the same unseen complexity. Every act of washing repeated the same interaction. The body already shaped by earlier rituals continued to be influenced by something that was never fully understood. The longer this continued, the more the difference between appearance and condition widened. The surface improved with each wash, while the underlying risks accumulated quietly. The ritual succeeded in maintaining the image, but it did not fully control the reality. The body was not simply being cleaned. It was being managed through a series of actions that focused on what could be seen and ignored what could not. The water, central to this process, played a dual role that was never fully acknowledged. It removed and it delivered at the same time. The repeated washing created the impression of constant purity, yet each contact with the Nile introduced unseen elements directly onto already exposed skin. This cycle turned cleansing into a quiet form of exposure, where the surface improved while hidden risks continued to build. The next step deepened this contradiction even further as substances like milk and honey were applied directly onto the body, forming a layer that could slowly spoil and turn against the skin itself. Milk and honey were introduced into the ritual not as food but as substances meant to improve the surface of the body, adding softness, smoothness, and a refined appearance that simple water could not provide. Bowls were prepared in advance, mixtures carefully combined, their textures thick and rich, their colors pale and golden. From a distance they suggested nourishment, something gentle and beneficial, something that would restore what earlier steps might have disturbed. The pharaoh's skin, already stripped and treated, was now ready to receive another layer. Servants applied these mixtures slowly, spreading them across the body with deliberate movements. The texture was heavier than water, more persistent, designed to remain on the skin rather than run off it. Honey clung to the surface, while milk softened its edges, allowing it to be distributed evenly. The process was calm, controlled, and repeated in the same way each time. It appeared careful, almost protective, as if the body were being cared for with something valuable. At first, the effect seemed to justify the method. The skin appeared smoother, its surface more uniform, its texture refined. Light reflected differently across it, creating the impression of health and vitality. The mixture combined with the oils used earlier gave the body a polished appearance that aligned perfectly with the image that needed to be maintained. Everything suggested improvement. But the nature of these substances carried its own complications. Milk and honey were not stable. They changed over time, especially in an environment where heat was constant and storage was limited. What appeared fresh at the moment of preparation could begin to alter quickly, even before it was applied. The difference was not always immediately visible. It developed gradually, quietly, without drawing attention. When these substances were placed on the skin, they did not remain unchanged. The warmth of the body combined with the surrounding temperature created conditions where they could begin to break down. Honey thickened further, trapping particles from the air. Milk, once smooth, could begin to shift in consistency. The mixture, which had been intended to improve the skin, started to interact with it in ways that were not fully understood. The surface still appeared controlled. The ritual still seemed successful. But beneath that surface, the skin was being covered in materials that did not always remain safe. Pores that had already been affected by previous steps were now exposed to substances that could settle into them. The body, unable to remove these layers, immediately carried them until the next stage of the ritual began. Servants continued their work without interruption. Third, their role was to apply to spread to maintain the appearance. They did not adjust the method based on how the substances changed. The mixture was prepared, and it was used. The result, as long as it looked correct, confirmed that the process was working. There was no reason to question what could not be seen. It is difficult not to feel a growing sense of discomfort when imagining how this would have felt over time. The skin, already exposed from shaving and layered with oils, was now coated again with substances that could change while resting on it. The body was not allowed to remain clear. It was constantly covered, constantly adjusted, constantly reshaped by materials that were not neutral. If we compare this to modern experience, it would be like applying food-based substances directly onto the skin and leaving them there under heat, trusting that their natural origin makes them safe even as they begin to change. Today, such a practice would be carefully controlled or avoided. In this setting, it was repeated as part of the routine. The belief behind this step reinforced its continuation. Milk was associated with nourishment. Honey was associated with preservation and value. Together, they carried meanings that extended beyond their physical properties. They were seen as beneficial, almost symbolic in their ability to improve what they touched. This belief allowed their use to continue without question, even when the conditions were not ideal. Over time, the accumulation of these layers created an increasingly complex surface. Oil, wax, milk, and honey combined, forming mixtures that were not part of any single step, but the result of many. The body carried all of them at once, each interacting with the others in ways that were not visible from a distance. The illusion of simplicity remained, even as the reality became more complicated. The longer this process continued, the more dependent the appearance became on maintaining it. Any interruption would reveal the underlying condition of the skin, something that the ritual was designed to prevent. So the layers were added again and again, each one reinforcing the last, each one contributing to the image that had to be preserved. What makes this particularly unsettling is how easily the idea of care was confused with the act of covering. The body was treated constantly, but not always in ways that supported its condition. It was managed, adjusted, and refined, but rarely allowed to exist without interference. The substances used were chosen for their effect on appearance, not for their long-term impact. From the outside, everything still appeared controlled. The pharaoh's skin looked smooth, luminous, and carefully maintained. Nothing in that image suggested instability or risk. The ritual achieved its purpose. It created the impression of perfection, of a body untouched by ordinary conditions. And yet beneath that surface, the combination of heat, time, and repeated application created a situation where the very substances meant to improve the skin could begin to work against it. The process did not stop. It continued, supported by belief and repetition, even as its effects became more complex. Layers of milk and honey gave the appearance of nourishment and care, yet under heat they could begin to change, settling into the skin and mixing with everything already present. This turned the surface into something that held more than it revealed, quietly allowing irritation to build beneath it. Next came an even more deceptive layer as thick cosmetics were pressed onto the skin, sealing everything underneath, while creating the illusion that nothing was wrong at all. Thick layers of cosmetics were applied only after the skin had been washed, shaved, coated, and reshaped through earlier rituals, as if the final step was not to care for the body, but to perfect the image that others would see. Servants prepared the materials carefully, grinding pigments into fine powders, mixing them with oils, and placing them within reach before the application began. Everything was arranged with precision, and nothing about the process was left to chance. From a distance, it appeared controlled and refined. Another extension of the system that maintained the pharaoh's flawless presence. The most visible element of this transformation was the use of kohl around the eyes. It was applied with steady hands, dark and defined, shaping the gaze into something sharper and more deliberate. The lines extended outward, creating symmetry that suggested control and strength. This was not simply decoration. It was a statement, one that reinforced the image of power and composure. At the same time, powders were pressed onto the skin, smoothing the surface further, reducing the visibility of any irregularities that might have remained. At first, the effect seemed immediate and effective. The skin appeared even, consistent, and free from blemishes. Any redness, any irritation, any unevenness created by previous steps was hidden beneath the layer. The face in particular became a controlled surface where nothing unexpected was allowed to show. The result aligned perfectly with the expectation that the pharaoh should appear beyond ordinary physical limitations. But the materials used for this transformation were not neutral. They did not simply sit on the surface and disappear at the end of the day. They remained interacting with the skin beneath them. The powders could settle into pores that had already been affected by repeated shaving and layering. The kohl applied daily accumulated in the same areas, building over time in ways that were not immediately visible. The routine did not allow for interruption. Cosmetics were applied each day in the same manner, covering whatever the skin revealed. There was no pause to observe whether the condition of the skin was improving or worsening. The goal was consistency in appearance, not changing condition. If a mark appeared, it was covered. If irritation developed, it was hidden. The surface remained controlled even as the underlying state shifted. Servants continued their work without hesitation. Their responsibility was to maintain the image, not to question the effect of the materials they used. Each stroke of pigment, each layer of powder, was applied with care, ensuring that the final result met the expected standard. The pharaoh's face became a surface that could be adjusted and corrected continuously, without ever revealing what lay beneath. It is difficult not to feel a growing sense of tension when imagining how this would have felt over time. The skin, already exposed to repeated treatments, was now sealed beneath layers that did not allow it to recover fully. The body was not given space to return to its natural state. It was constantly covered, constantly managed, constantly presented as something other than what it was. If we compare this to modern habits, it would be like applying heavy makeup every single day over irritated skin, never allowing it to rest, never addressing the cause of the irritation, only covering it repeatedly. The appearance might improve in the moment, but the condition beneath would continue to change. Today, such a pattern would be recognized quickly. In this setting, it was expected. The belief behind this practice reinforced its continuation. Appearance defined reality. If the pharaoh looked flawless, then he was considered flawless. The presence of cosmetics did not contradict this idea. Instead, it supported it. The materials used were part of the system that created the image, and that image was what mattered. Over time, the accumulation of these layers created a surface that was increasingly dependent on them. Removing the cosmetics completely would reveal the underlying condition of the skin, something that the ritual was designed to prevent. So, the layers remained. They were reapplied, reinforced, and maintained without interruption. The contradiction between what was seen and what was experienced grew more pronounced. The face appeared smooth and controlled. Yet beneath that surface, the skin could be dealing with irritation, with blocked pores, with reactions that were never allowed to become visible. The illusion remained intact, even as the reality became more complex. What makes this particularly unsettling is how complete the transformation was. The pharaoh's face, the most visible part of his body, became entirely shaped by these materials. It was no longer a direct reflection of his physical condition. It was a constructed surface designed to communicate perfection, regardless of what lay beneath. The longer this process continued, the more difficult it became to separate the image from the reality. The cosmetics did not simply enhance the appearance, they replaced it. The body adapted to this replacement, carrying the effects of constant coverage, without ever being allowed to reveal them. From the outside, nothing appeared wrong. The pharaoh moved through spaces with a face that looked composed, controlled, and complete. The illusion held, supported by layers that concealed more than they revealed. The system worked exactly as intended. Layers of coal and powder created a flawless surface that hid irritation, damage, and changes in the skin beneath, turning the face into something that could no longer reveal its true condition. This constant coverage sealed problems into the skin, allowing them to develop quietly out of sight. The next step made this even more dangerous, as the very materials used for beauty contained substances that would not just hide damage, but slowly create it from within. Heavy substances were not avoided in the preparation of beauty. They were chosen deliberately, ground into fine powders, and mixed into cosmetics that would be applied directly onto the skin each day. Servants handled these materials with familiarity, measuring and blending them into pigments that appeared smooth and controlled. From a distance, nothing about them seemed unusual. The powders were pale or dark, depending on their purpose, refined in texture, and easy to spread across the surface of the body. They became part of the routine, as ordinary as oil or linen, integrated into a system that focused entirely on appearance. The belief behind their use gave them meaning that extended beyond their physical form. These substances were not seen as harmful. They were believed to offer protection, to guard the body against unseen forces, to strengthen the image of purity that surrounded the pharaoh. When applied around the eyes or across the skin, they were thought to do more than enhance appearance. They were believed to serve as a barrier, something that could defend against illness and corruption. This belief made their use not only acceptable but necessary. The application followed the same careful rhythm as other steps. The powders were pressed gently into the skin, spread evenly and blended until they became part of the surface. Kohl lined the eyes with precision, while lighter substances softened the tone of the skin, creating a controlled and uniform appearance. The result was immediate. The face appeared sharper, more defined, more complete. Any irregularity that might have remained was hidden beneath the layer. At first, the effect seemed entirely positive. The skin looked refined, the eyes appeared more intense, and the overall image aligned perfectly with the expectations placed on the pharaoh. There was no visible sign that anything was wrong. The materials performed their function, reinforcing the illusion that everything was under control. But the nature of these substances introduced a different kind of interaction with the body. Unlike oils or wax, they did not simply sit on the surface. Fine particles settled into the skin, moving into pores, remaining in place long after they were applied. With each day, with each repeated application, the amount increased. The body was not given time to clear what had been placed upon it. The layers built slowly, almost imperceptibly. The effects of this accumulation were not immediate. They developed gradually, without clear warning. The skin, already affected by earlier treatments, responded in ways that were not always visible from the outside. Irritation could deepen beneath the surface. Sensitivity could increase. But these changes did not interrupt the ritual. They were not part of what the ritual measured. Servants continued the process without adjustment. Their role was to apply, to maintain, and to ensure that the appearance remained consistent. The materials were trusted, reinforced by belief and tradition. There was no reason within that system to question their effect. The image they created was enough to justify their use. It is difficult not to feel a sense of unease when imagining how this would have unfolded over time. The body, already subjected to repeated layers of oils, wax, and organic substances, was now receiving materials that interacted with it in a more lasting way. The surface remained controlled, but beneath it, the conditions were changing slowly. If we compare this to modern understanding, it would be like applying substances known to be harmful directly onto the skin every single day, not as a mistake, but as part of a trusted routine. Today, such a practice would be avoided immediately. In this setting, it was reinforced, repeated, and maintained without hesitation. The belief in protection made it possible to ignore any subtle signs of harm. If the material was thought to guard against illness, then its presence could not be questioned. Any discomfort that might have arisen could be interpreted as something else, something unrelated. The ritual remained intact, supported by the idea that it was beneficial. Over time, the contradiction between belief and reality became more significant. The materials were applied to preserve the body, to protect it, to enhance it. Yet their interaction with the skin suggested a different outcome. The body carried them continuously without pause, without removal that would fully restore its natural state. The more the appearance depended on these materials, the more difficult it became to separate the body from them. The skin adapted to their presence, carrying the effects quietly, while the surface continued to present the same controlled image. The illusion remained stable, even as the underlying conditions shifted. What makes this particularly unsettling is how complete the trust in these substances was. They were not used cautiously. They were integrated fully into the routine, applied daily without hesitation. Their role was fixed, and their meaning was clear within the system that used them. From the outside, nothing appeared wrong. The pharaoh's face remained composed, defined, and consistent. The cosmetics performed their role perfectly, concealing what needed to be concealed, reinforcing what needed to be seen. The system functioned exactly as intended. And yet, beneath that surface, the interaction between these materials and the body continued, slowly and steadily, without drawing attention. The process did not stop. It continued, supported by belief, by repetition, and by the need to maintain the image above all else. Heavy metals embedded within daily cosmetics became part of the skin itself over time, settling beneath the surface while the outward appearance remained flawless and controlled. This slow accumulation turned protection into quiet damage, allowing harm to develop without ever being acknowledged. Next came an even sharper contrast, as perfectly clean linen covered a body that was far less clean beneath it than anyone was meant to realize. Fresh linen was brought forward at the end of each preparation, handled carefully, folded with precision, and placed onto the pharaoh's body as the final visible layer of the ritual. The fabric was light, pale, and smooth, often appearing almost untouched by the world outside. From a distance, it suggested purity without effort. From a distance, it suggested purity without effort. It did not carry visible stains. It did not show the signs of daily use that were common among others. The presence of clean linen alone was enough to reinforce the image that everything beneath it must also be clean. Servants worked methodically to dress the body, ensuring that every fold lay correctly and every edge aligned with the expected form. The linen was not simply clothing. It was part of the presentation, a surface that communicated order, discipline, and control. The brightness of the fabric reflected light, drawing attention away from anything that might lie beneath it. The more flawless the linen appeared, the less reason there seemed to be to question what it covered. At first, the effect was convincing. The contrast between the environment outside and the controlled appearance of the pharaoh was clear. Where others carried dust, wear, and irregularity, he appeared untouched. Where others carried dust, the linen created a barrier, both physical and visual, separating him from the ordinary conditions of the world. It completed the illusion that had been constructed through every step before it, that the condition of the body beneath that fabric did not always match the surface that covered it. The rituals that prepared the skin focused on appearance, not on complete restoration. Layers of oil, wax, and other substances remained even after washing. The skin treated repeatedly carried the effects of those processes in ways that were not immediately visible. The linen did not remove these layers. It simply rested above them. The fabric itself contributed to this separation between appearance and reality. Linen was changed frequently, cleaned with care, and maintained to preserve its brightness. It created a sense of renewal each time it was applied. But this renewal existed only on the surface. The body beneath it did not experience the same reset. It carried forward the accumulation of previous steps, unchanged by the presence of new fabric. Servants ensured that the linen remained pristine. Any sign of imperfection was corrected quickly. A mark on the fabric would be visible, and visibility was what the system responded to. The condition of the skin, hidden from view, did not receive the same level of attention. It was not ignored completely, but it was not the focus. The focus remained on what others could see. This created a quiet but persistent contrast. The outer layer suggested cleanliness and control. The inner condition could be far more complex. The body, covered and concealed, did not have to match the image that the linen presented. The illusion was strong enough to replace the need for alignment between the two. It is difficult not to feel a sense of tension when imagining how this contrast would have been maintained over time. The body, already layered with substances and exposed to repeated treatments, was now enclosed beneath fabric that limited airflow and trapped heat. The environment added to this effect. Warmth remained close to the skin, held in place by the very material that signaled purity from the outside. If we compare this to modern experience, it would be like wearing perfectly clean clothing over skin that has not been fully cleaned, trusting the appearance of the fabric to represent the condition beneath it. The outer layer looks correct, and that becomes enough. The underlying state is no longer questioned because it cannot be seen. The belief that supported this system made the contrast possible. Clean clothing was associated with cleanliness itself. If the linen was fresh, then the body was assumed to be fresh as well. The two ideas became linked, even though they were not always aligned. The presence of one replaced the need to confirm the other. Over time, this separation between appearance and condition became more pronounced. The more the system relied on visible indicators, the less it accounted for what was hidden. The body adapted to this pattern, carrying the effects of repeated rituals without ever fully resetting. The linen was replaced, but the body beneath it continued as it was. Servants maintained the cycle with consistency. They removed the linen, replaced it, cleaned it, and restored its brightness. Each step reinforced the illusion that everything was being cared for. The repetition created stability. The image remained intact, and that was enough to confirm that the process was working. What makes this particularly unsettling is how complete the illusion became. The pharaoh appeared flawless, his clothing immaculate, his presence controlled. Nothing in that image suggested imbalance or accumulation. The system succeeded in presenting a version of reality that did not fully match the condition beneath it. The longer this continued, the more difficult it became to separate the two. The image and the body moved further apart, connected only by the assumption that they were the same. The linen became a surface that carried meaning beyond its function, a symbol that replaced direct observation. From the outside, everything remained consistent. The pharaoh moved through spaces with the same controlled appearance, the same clean fabric, the same sense of order. The illusion held without interruption, supported by layers that concealed more than they revealed. Clean linen created a flawless outer surface that suggested purity, while the body beneath it continued to carry layers of oil, wax, and residue that were never fully removed. This contrast allowed appearance to replace reality, hiding what could not be seen behind what could. Next came an even subtler illusion, as breath itself was masked with herbs and scents, covering deeper problems that no surface could truly hide. Breath was treated as another surface to control, something that had to be adjusted before the pharaoh could be seen or heard by others. Servants prepared small bundles of herbs, crushed leaves, and resinous mixtures, placing them within reach as part of the daily routine. These were not consumed for nourishment. They were chewed, held in the mouth, and allowed to release their scent slowly. From the outside, this appeared simple, even practical, a way to maintain freshness in a climate where heat made everything more intense. The expectation was clear. The pharaoh could not carry the natural scent of the body, not even in something as subtle as breath. Every aspect of his presence had to be controlled, from the way he appeared to the way he was perceived at close distance. Speech itself became part of the ritual. When he spoke, the air around him needed to reflect the same sense of order that defined the rest of his image. At first, the effect seemed immediate. The herbs released noticeable scent that replaced anything less controlled. The mouth felt refreshed, the breath altered, and the illusion was maintained. To those nearby, the result confirmed that the ritual was working. The presence of fragrance suggested cleanliness, just as it did on the skin, but the source of breath did not change. The herbs did not address what produced the scent in the first place. They did not reach beneath the surface. They did not alter the condition of the teeth or the gums. They covered, replaced, and masked, but they did not resolve. The difference between appearance and condition remained. The structure of the mouth carried its own complexities. Teeth were exposed to daily use, to food, and to substances that could affect their surface over time. Without methods to restore or repair them fully, changes developed gradually. Small areas of damage could expand. Sensitivity could increase. The gums, exposed and vulnerable, could react in ways that were not immediately visible from the outside. The routine did not pause to address these changes. Instead, it continued to apply the same solution. Herbs were chewed again, scents released again, the surface restored. The appearance of freshness returned, even as the underlying condition remained the same or shifted further. The ritual focused on what could be corrected quickly, not on what required deeper attention. Servants maintained this pattern without hesitation. Their role was to prepare, to provide, to ensure that the pharaoh's presence remained consistent. The herbs were selected, crushed, and presented at the right moment. The timing mattered, the result mattered, the process itself was not questioned. It is difficult not to feel a sense of quiet tension when imagining how this would have unfolded over time. The mouth, like the skin, was treated as something that could be adjusted on the surface without addressing what lay beneath. The body continued its natural processes, while the ritual continued to reshape how those processes were perceived. If we compare this to modern experience, it would be like relying on strong breath fresheners every day while ignoring persistent issues within the mouth, trusting the immediate effect while the underlying condition remains unchanged. Today, such a pattern would be recognized quickly. In this setting, it was normalized. The belief behind this practice reinforced its continuation. A pleasant scent was associated with cleanliness and control. If the breath carried fragrance, then it was considered acceptable. The presence of that scent replaced the need to investigate further. The illusion held, supported by repetition and expectation. Over time, the gap between what was experienced and what was presented became more pronounced. The mouth, affected by daily use and natural changes, carried conditions that were not visible from the outside. The herbs, applied repeatedly, created a layer of perception that replaced direct awareness. The system allowed the appearance to define reality. The more this routine was repeated, the more it became part of what defined care itself. Addressing the cause was not part of the process. Maintaining the surface was the distinction, faded, replaced by the consistency of the ritual. The pharaoh's presence remained controlled even as the body beneath it followed its own course. What makes this particularly unsettling is how complete the substitution became. The scent of the herbs did not just cover the breath, it redefined it. What others perceived became the accepted truth. regardless of what lay beneath. The illusion was strong enough to replace the need for alignment between the two. The longer this continued, the more difficult it became to separate appearance from condition. The herbs were always present, always applied, always part of the routine. The mouth adapted to this pattern, carrying both the effect of the ritual and the reality beneath it at the same time. From the outside, nothing appeared wrong. The pharaoh spoke with composure, his breath controlled, his presence consistent with the image that had been constructed. The system worked exactly as intended. It maintained the illusion without interruption. And yet beneath that surface, the condition of the mouth continued to change, influenced by factors that were never fully addressed. The ritual did not stop. It continued, supported by belief, by repetition, and by the need to maintain control over every visible detail. Fragrant herbs created the impression of clean breath, masking what developed quietly within the mouth, as the true condition remained unchanged beneath the surface. This substitution allowed deeper problems to persist without interruption, hidden behind a controlled sense that replaced reality. An even less visible risk followed as the very tools used for grooming and cleaning were shared, carrying unseen traces from one person to another without ever being fully removed. Tools were prepared before the pharaoh entered the room, laid out in careful order, polished to appear clean, and arranged as if they belonged to a system of precision and control. Blades for shaving, small instruments for grooming, and containers for application were placed within reach, each one part of a routine that had been repeated countless times. From a distance, nothing seemed out of place. The tools reflected light, their surfaces smooth, their edges sharp, suggesting readiness and care. The assumption was simple. If a tool looked clean, then it was clean. This belief shaped the way it was handled, the way it was used, and the way it was returned to its place after each ritual. There was no clear boundary between one use and the knee. XT. The same blade could be lifted again, the same instrument brought back into contact with the skin, without any process that fully separated its previous use from its current one. Servants worked with efficiency. Their movements were controlled, their actions consistent, their focus fixed on maintaining the routine without interruption. When a blade was used, it was wiped, sometimes rinsed, then set aside, ready to be used again. The act of cleaning was quick, practical, and based on what could be seen. If no visible residue remained, then the tool was considered ready. But what could not be seen remained. The surface of the blade, though polished, carried traces of what it had touched before. The skin, already exposed through repeated shaving, provided a point of contact where these traces could transfer. Each use of the tool created a connection between bodies, even if that connection was never acknowledged. The environment itself intensified this effect. Heat settled over everything, holding moisture close to the surface. Air moved slowly, carrying fine particles that settled onto tools between uses. In these conditions, what remained on the surface of an instrument did not disappear quickly. It stayed, altered, and developed in ways that were not visible at a glance. The routine continued without pause. Tools were passed from one task to another, from one moment to the next, integrated into a system that valued continuity over separation. The idea of dedicating a tool to a single use did not exist within this structure. Efficiency required repetition, and repetition required repetition, and repetition required reuse. From a distance, the process appeared seamless. The pharaoh's body was prepared with precision. Each step followed the last without hesitation. The tools performed their function, shaping the surface, refining the image and maintaining the illusion of control. Nothing in that sequence suggested risk. Everything suggested order. Yet beneath that order, a quieter pattern existed. The skin, already marked by small cuts and exposed areas, came into contact with tools that carried unseen traces from earlier use. Each pass of the blade did more than remove hair. It created a point of exchange, a moment where what had been left behind could be introduced again. Servants did not adjust their actions based on this possibility. Their role was defined by the visible outcome. The blade had to be sharp. The movement had to be precise. The result had to meet expectations. What happened beyond that was not part of their responsibility. It is difficult not to feel a sense of unease when imagining how this system would have functioned over time. The tools moving between uses carried with them a history, that was not erased. The body, receiving these tools again and again, became part of that cycle. The ritual continued unchanged, supported by belief and repetition. If we compare this to modern understanding, it would be like using the same personal grooming tools across multiple individuals without proper sterilization, trusting the appearance of cleanliness while ignoring what remains on the surface. Today, such a practice would be considered dangerous. In this setting, it was part of the routine. The belief that supported this system remained consistent. Cleanliness was defined by what could be observed. A tool that looked clean was treated as clean. The absence of visible residue was enough to confirm that it was safe. The idea that something could remain beyond sight did not shape the process. Over time, this created a network of contacts that extended beyond a single moment. The same tools connected different stages of the ritual, different parts of the body, and potentially different individuals. The system did not recognize these connections. It continued to operate as if each use were separate. The more the routine was repeated, the more stable it appeared. The process did not change. The results remained consistent. The illusion held. The pharaoh's appearance remained controlled, his skin smooth, his presence refined. The system functioned as expected. What makes this particularly unsettling is how completely the appearance of order replaced the need for deeper consideration. The tools were part of a structure that emphasized precision and repetition. Their role was fixed. Their use was unquestioned. The system moved forward without reflection. The body once again was shaped by processes that did not fully account for what lay beneath the surface. The tools that refined it also connected it to what had come before. The ritual maintained the image, but it did not isolate the body from the conditions that surrounded it. Shared tools created a surface-level order, while quietly carrying unseen traces from one use to another, turning each contact into a point of exchange that was never fully removed. This repetition allowed hidden risks to move through the ritual without interruption, embedded within actions that appeared controlled and precise. A more direct danger emerged from the water itself, where unseen parasites waited within each wash, ready to enter the body through the smallest openings in the skin. Contact with water did not end when the surface appeared clean, and the moment the body was exposed to it, something else began that could not be seen or easily understood. The basins were filled as they always were, carried from the Nile, placed within reach, and poured in steady, controlled motions across the skin. From a distance, nothing about this process suggested danger. It looked like the continuation of a system designed for purity, a method repeated often enough to feel unquestioned. The river itself remained constant in its presence, wide and essential, shaping every part of life that depended on it. It moved through the land, carrying silt, organic matter, and forms of life too small to be noticed. Its surface could appear calm, its water clear enough when gathered, its use so familiar that it was rarely examined beyond what could be seen. It was trusted because it had always been there. When water touched a pharaoh's body, it did more than remove what was visible. It carried with it elements that moved within it, unseen and unrecognized. These were not part of the ritual's intention, but they were part of its reality. Each time water flowed across the skin, it brought these elements into direct contact with a surface that had already been altered by previous steps. The condition of the skin made this contact more significant. Repeated shaving had created small openings, areas where the surface was not entirely intact. Oils and other substances had been layered across it, sometimes sealing what lay beneath. When water reached these areas, it did not simply pass over them. It settled, interacted, and introduced what it carried into places that were no longer fully protected. The effect was not immediate. There was no visible change in the moment. The ritual continued as it always had. The body was washed, dried, and prepared again for the next stage. From the outside, everything appeared consistent. The process worked as it was expected to work. The illusion of cleanliness remained complete, but beneath that surface something quieter was taking place. The organisms carried by the water did not remain outside the body. They moved inward slowly without drawing attention. The body did not respond in a way that could be seen immediately. The changes developed over time, hidden within processes that were not part of the ritual's awareness. Servants continued their work without hesitation. Their role was to maintain the routine, not to question the source of what they used. The water was poured again and again, each contact reinforcing the belief that cleansing was being achieved. The possibility that the same water could introduce something harmful did not alter the process. It is difficult not to feel a sense of unease when imagining how this would have unfolded across repeated days. The body, already shaped by earlier rituals, was now exposed continuously to something that carried its own life within it. The contact was gentle, controlled, and routine. Yet its effect was neither immediate nor visible. It developed slowly beneath the surface. If we compare this to modern understanding, it would be like exposing the body repeatedly to water known to contain parasites, trusting the act of washing while ignoring what that water carries. Today, such a risk would be managed carefully. In this setting, it remained part of the system, repeated without interruption. The belief that supported this practice remained unchanged. Water cleaned. That idea was strong enough to override any contradiction. The visible result confirmed the belief. The body looked better after washing, and that was enough. The unseen remained outside the definition of what mattered. Over time, this created a quiet accumulation of effects. The body carried what had been introduced, while the ritual continued to reinforce the idea that everything was under control. The more often the process was repeated, the more stable it appeared. The illusion became stronger even as the underlying condition shifted. The connection between the river and the body became more direct with each repetition. What flowed through the Nile eventually reached the skin, and from the skin, it moved further inward. The process did not stop. It continued, supported by repetition and belief without interruption. What makes this particularly unsettling is how complete the trust in the ritual remained. There was no moment where the process was reconsidered. No step was altered. The system functioned as it always had, producing the same visible result, reinforcing the same belief. From the outside, nothing appeared wrong. The pharaoh's body remained controlled, his presence unchanged, his image intact. The water had done its work, at least in the way that could be seen. The illusion held without question. And yet, beneath that surface, the interaction between the body and what the water carried continued quietly. The changes it introduced were not immediate, but they were persistent. The body responded in ways that were not part of the ritual's design, carrying forward the effects of each contact. The more this continued, the wider the gap became between what was presented and what was experienced. The ritual maintained the image, but it did not isolate the body from the conditions that shaped it. The process succeeded in appearance, even as it allowed something else to develop. Contact with the Nile appeared to cleanse the body. Contact with the Nile appeared to cleanse the body. Yet each wash introduced unseen organisms that moved beneath the surface without immediate sign. This quiet exposure turned a ritual of purity into a pathway for hidden illness, allowing changes to develop slowly over time. A different kind of pressure followed as heavy fragrances were applied in excess, overwhelming the senses while the body beneath them struggled to respond. Fragrance was not an addition to the ritual. It was its final confirmation, a signal that everything before it had been completed and that the pharaoh's presence was ready to be perceived by others. Small vessels of perfume were brought forward, their contents thick, concentrated, and prepared to linger. Servants applied these substances with care, pressing them into the skin, into the hair, and into the fabric that surrounded the body. The goal was not subtlety. The scent had to be unmistakable, strong enough to define the space around him before he even entered it. The meaning behind this step was deeply embedded in belief. A pleasant scent was not just desirable. It was associated with purity, with order, with the absence of corruption. To smell clean was to be clean. This idea shaped the way fragrance was used. It was not applied lightly. It was layered, reinforced, and maintained until it became part of the pharaoh's identity. At first, the effect was immediate and controlled. The air around the body shifted, filled with a scent that replaced everything else. It overpowered any trace of what might have existed beneath it. The result was convincing. To those nearby, the pharaoh appeared untouched by the natural conditions that affected others. His presence felt complete, defined by the fragrance that surrounded him. But the nature of these substances made their effect more complex than it appeared. Perfumes were often concentrated, composed of oils and extracts that did not dissipate quickly. When applied in large amounts, They did not simply create a pleasant scent, they settled onto the skin, mixing with the layers already present, becoming part of a surface that had been built step by step. The body, already exposed to repeated treatments, responded to this new layer in ways that were not always visible. The skin, covered in oils, wax, and other substances, now received another coating that could interact with it over time. The scent remained strong, but beneath it, the condition of the skin could begin to shift. Sensitivity could increase. Irritation could develop. These changes were not immediately visible, but they were present. The effect was not limited to the skin. The air itself became part of the experience. The constant ration of fragrance in enclosed spaces could be overwhelming, settling into the environment and lingering long after the initial application. Each breath carried that scent inward, making it part of the body's internal experience as well as its external presentation. Servants maintained the routine without adjustment. Their role was to ensure that the scent remained strong, consistent, and unmistakable. If it faded, more was applied. If it seemed insufficient, it was reinforced. The process did not account for how the body responded. It accounted only for how the result was perceived. It is difficult not to feel a sense of pressure when imagining how this would have felt over time. The body, already layered and controlled, was now surrounded by a constant presence that could not be easily escaped. The scent was not something that could be set aside. It remained filling the air, settling into the skin, becoming part of every moment. If we compare this to modern experience, it would be like applying strong perfume repeatedly throughout the day in an enclosed space, allowing it to build until it becomes overwhelming while ignoring the effect it has on both the skin and the body's ability to respond to it. Today, such a situation would be adjusted quickly. In this setting, it was reinforced. The belief behind this practice made it possible to ignore its effects. Fragrance was associated with something higher, something that signaled order and control. If the scent remained strong, then the ritual was successful. Any discomfort that might have developed did not alter that conclusion. The appearance of purity was enough. Over time, the accumulation of fragrance created an environment that was difficult to separate from the body itself. The skin carried it, the air held it, the fabric absorbed it. The system became self-reinforcing, each layer adding to the last, each applicate, ion strengthening the illusion. The contradiction between appearance and experience grew more pronounced. The pharaoh appeared refined, controlled, untouched by discomfort. Yet, the body beneath that surface was responding to layers that were not neutral. The ritual maintained the image, but it did not fully account for the cost. What makes this particularly unsettling is how completely the system relied on perception. The scent defined the experience for others. It replaced the need to observe anything else. As long as the fragrance remained, the illusion held. The body's response did not interrupt that illusion. The longer this continued, the more the body became shaped by the routine. It adapted to the constant presence of fragrance, carrying its effects quietly, while the surface continued to present the same controlled image. The process did not stop. It continued, supported by belief and repetition. From the outside, everything remained consistent. The pharaoh moved through spaces, surrounded by a scent that defined him, his presence controlled, his image intact. Nothing suggested an imbalance. The system worked as it was designed to work. And yet, beneath that surface, the interaction between the body and the substances applied to it continued, slowly, persistently, without drawing attention. The ritual achieved its purpose, even as it introduced new layers of complexity that were never fully acknowledged. Excessive fragrance created a powerful illusion of purity, surrounding the body with a controlled scent, while the skin and airways beneath it responded to the constant exposure. This pressure turned something meant to refine into something that could overwhelm, building quietly over time. Another layer of contradiction followed as even the tools used to clean the teeth would begin to wear them down, turning daily care into a slow form of damage. Powder was brought forward in small containers, dry, fine at a glance, yet coarse when touched, prepared as part of a routine that was meant to maintain the appearance of cleanliness within the mouth. Servants handled it with familiarity, dipping fingers or simple tools into the mixture, before applying it directly onto the teeth. There was no hesitation in the process. It followed the same quiet precision as every other step, measured, repeated, and accepted as necessary. The composition of this powder was simple. It often contained crushed materials such as sand or ash, ground down just enough to be spread across the surface of the teeth. These substances were chosen for their ability to scrape away what was visible, to remove residue, and to create a sense of smoothness after contact. From a distance, the result appeared effective. The teeth looked cleaner, the surface more uniform, the immediate effect confirming that the method worked. The action itself was direct. The powder was rubbed across the teeth and pressed against them with enough force to create friction. This friction was the point. It was what removed what could be seen. It was what produced the feeling of cleanliness once the process was complete. The sensation may have been sharp, but it was brief, and the result was immediate. At first, the outcome seemed to justify the method. The teeth appeared brighter. The surface felt smoother. Any visible buildup was reduced. The ritual aligned with the same principle that guided every other step. If the surface looked better, then the process was successful. There was no need to consider what lay beneath that surface. But the nature of these materials made their effect more complex than it appeared. Sand and ash did not simply remove what was unwanted. They also removed part of the surface itself. Each application, each movement, each repetition wore down the outer layer of the teeth in small, gradual ways that were not immediately visible. The enamel, though not understood in the same terms at the time, acted as a protective layer. It was not meant to be removed. Yet the process of cleaning, repeated daily, slowly reduced it. The change was not sudden. It developed over time, unnoticed at first, then more difficult to ignore as the structure of the teeth began to shift. Servants continued the routine without adjustment. Their role was to maintain the appearance, to ensure that the teeth looked clean, that the ritual was completed as expected. The powder was applied again and again, each use reinforcing the immediate effect while contributing to a longer process that was not part of the visible result. The sensation within the mouth may have changed gradually. Areas of sensitivity could develop, small at first, then more noticeable over time. The teeth, exposed to repeated friction, became less protected. The gums, already vulnerable, could respond as well, affected by the same pressure and abrasion. But these changes were not part of what the ritual measured. It is difficult not to feel a sense of quiet discomfort when imagining how this would have felt across repeated days. The act of cleaning, something that should preserve, instead became something that slowly altered the structure it was meant to maintain. The process did not pause. It continued, supported by repetition and belief. If we compare this to modern understanding, it would be like brushing the teeth daily with materials designed to scrape aggressively, removing not only what is unwanted, but also what protects the teeth themselves. Today, such a method would be adjusted immediately. In this setting, it was accepted without question. The belief behind this practice remained consistent with every other step. Cleanliness was defined by what could be seen and felt immediately. A smooth surface meant success. The absence of visible residue confirmed that the method worked. There was no framework within the system to consider long-term effects that developed slowly beneath the surface. Over time, the contradiction became more pronounced. The teeth appeared clean, yet their structure was changing. The surface improved in the moment, while the underlying protection was reduced. The ritual maintained the image even as it contributed to a different outcome. The more this process was repeated, the more dependent the appearance became on continuing it. Any pause would allow visible buildup to return, breaking the illusion that had been carefully maintained. So the routine continued, reinforcing itself, each step confirming the next. What makes this particularly unsettling is how completely the system relied on immediate results. The body's response over time did not alter the method. The ritual remained fixed, guided by what it achieved in the moment, rather than what it caused over longer periods. From the outside, nothing appeared wrong. The pharaoh's teeth looked clean, his presence controlled, his image intact. The system functioned exactly as intended. The illusion held, supported by actions that produced visible results quickly and consistently. And yet, beneath that surface, the interaction between the teeth and the materials used to clean them continued to shape their condition. The process did not stop. It continued, gradually altering what it was meant to preserve. Coarse powders created the immediate impression of clean, smooth teeth. Yet each use quietly wore away the protective surface that could not be restored once lost. This repetition turned daily care into a slow form of damage, hidden beneath the appearance of cleanliness. Concealment deepened further as elaborate wigs were placed over the head, hiding what they covered, while allowing something else to gather within them. Elaborate wigs were placed onto the head as a final adjustment, not to change the body itself, but to complete the image that others would see. They were crafted carefully, made from real hair or plant fibers, shaped into forms that suggested control, symmetry, and refinement. Servants handled them with precision, lifting them into place, aligning them with the head, ensuring that every strand followed the expected pattern. From a distance, the effect was convincing. The hair appeared full, ordered, and untouched by the conditions that affected everything else. The use of wigs served a clear purpose. The natural hair of the body had already been removed as part of earlier rituals. What replaced it was not allowed to grow or change unpredictably. It was fixed, shaped, and maintained separately from the body itself. This separation allowed the appearance to remain consistent regardless of what the body beneath it experienced. At first, the result appeared ideal. The wig created a clean outline, a controlled surface that framed the face and completed the pharaoh's presentation. It did not carry the irregularities of natural hair. It did not grow. It did not shift unexpectedly, and it could be adjusted easily if needed. The illusion of perfection extended upward, covering the head with the same precision that defined the rest of the body. But the nature of these wigs introduced a different kind of interaction with the environment. Unlike the skin, which could be washed and treated directly, the wig existed as a separate object that remained in contact with the air, with dust, and with everything that settled upon it. Each time it was worn, it collected what moved through the space around it. The Egyptian climate made this process difficult to avoid. Dust moved easily, carried by air that rarely remained still. Fine particles settle onto surfaces, clinging to anything that could hold them. The fibers of the wig, whether made from hair or plant material, provided exactly that kind of surface. They held what touched them, accumulating layers that were not always visible at first glance. The routine did include attempts to maintain these wigs. They were cleaned, adjusted, and stored with care, but the process was not always complete. What was visible could be removed. What was hidden within the fibers could remain. The structure of the wig allowed particles to settle deeper than the surface where they were more difficult to reach. Over time, this created a buildup that was not immediately obvious. The wig still appeared controlled from a distance. Its shape remained intact. Its position did not change. The illusion held, but beneath that surface, it carried more than what could be seen. Servants continued to place the wigs onto the pharaoh's head each day, aligning them carefully, ensuring that the presentation remained consistent. Their focus was on appearance. If the wig looked correct, then it was considered ready. The condition of what lay within its fibers was not part of what they measured. The contact between the wig and the head created another layer of interaction. The surface of the skin, already treated with oils and other substances, came into contact with the material of the wig. Heat from the body transferred upward, while the accumulated particles within the wig remained in place. The two layers met, each carrying its own elements, each influencing the other. It is difficult not to feel a sense of quiet discomfort when imagining how this would have felt over time. The head, covered by something that appeared clean, was in contact with a material that carried what had settled into it over repeated use. The body was not exposed directly, but it was not fully protected either. The layer that covered it was not neutral. If we compare this to modern experience, it would be like wearing the same head covering repeatedly in a dusty environment, cleaning it only on the surface and placing it back onto the head without addressing what remains within it. Today, such a pattern would be recognized quickly. In this setting, it was part of the routine. The belief that supported this practice remained consistent with everything that came before. Appearance defined reality. If the wig looked clean, then it was clean. The presence of dust or unseen elements did not alter that conclusion, because they were not visible. The illusion remained intact. Over time, the accumulation within the wig created conditions that were not immediately apparent. Small organisms could exist within the fibers, supported by the environment created by heat and contact. These conditions developed quietly without drawing attention, while the outer structure remained unchanged. The more the wig was used, the more it became part of the system that maintained the pharaoh's image. It was placed, removed, adjusted, and replaced, each time reinforcing the same appearance. The process did not pause to consider what might be building within it. It continued, supported by repetition and expectation. What makes this particularly unsettling is how complete the separation between appearance and condition became. The wig, like the linen and the cosmetics, created a surface that replaced the need to observe what lay beneath. It allowed the image to remain consistent, even as the underlying reality became more complex. From the outside, everything remained controlled. The pharaoh's head was covered, his appearance complete, his image intact. Nothing suggested an imbalance. The system worked as it was designed to work, maintaining the illusion without interruption. And yet, beneath that surface, the interaction between the wig and what it carried continued quietly. The process did not stop. It continued, shaped by the environment, by repetition, and by the absence of deeper examination. Elaborate wigs created a controlled and refined appearance while quietly holding dust and unseen organisms within their fibers, allowing accumulation to build over time without being fully removed. This concealment turned what should have been protection into something that carried its own hidden risks. An even more direct presence followed as these hidden spaces became environments where small creatures could live and multiply, remaining close to the body without ever being seen at a distance. Movement could not be seen from a distance, yet within the carefully arranged structure of the wig, something else began to exist. Something that did not follow the same rules of control and presentation. The wig remained in place, as it always did, shaped and aligned with precision, its surface smooth, its form consistent. To anyone looking from afar, it appeared unchanged. It completed the pharaoh's image, just as it was meant to. But within its fibers, beyond what could be easily observed, a different process was taking place. The materials used to create these wigs provided more than just structure. They created space, small gaps between strands, areas where particles settled and remained. Dust carried by the air did not simply pass over the surface. It became part of it, embedding itself deeper over time. With repeated use, these spaces grew more complex, holding more than what was intended. The environment encouraged this accumulation. Each remained constant, pressing against every surface, creating conditions that allowed small forms of life to persist. The wig, in contact with both air and body, became a place where these conditions met. It held warmth, it held material, it provided apply what was needed for something to remain and develop. At first, nothing about this was visible. The wig still appeared controlled, its surface unchanged. It was placed on the head each day, without hesitation. Servants adjusted it, aligned it, and ensured that it matched the expected form. The presence of anything within it was not part of what they measured. The appearance was enough, but within the fibers, movement existed. Small organisms found their way into the spaces that had been created through repeated use. They remained there unseen, supported by the environment that surrounded them. The warmth of the body, the accumulation of material, and the lack of complete cleaning allowed them to persist. The effect of this presence was not immediate. It did not alter the visible surface of the wig. The structure remained intact. The image remained consistent, but the contact between the wig and the skin created a connection that was difficult to avoid. What existed within the fibers was not entirely separate from the body beneath them. Servants continued their work without adjustment. Their role was to maintain the appearance, not to examine what lay within the materials they handled. The wig was placed onto the head, as it always had been, aligned carefully, its position corrected if needed. The process did not change, even as the conditions within the wig did. It is difficult not to feel a growing sense of discomfort when imagining how this would have felt over time. The head, covered by something that appeared refined, was in contact with a structure that held more than it revealed. The body, already shaped by earlier rituals, now carried an additional layer that could not be fully controlled. If we compare this to modern experience, it would be like wearing a head covering that has been exposed repeatedly to a warm, dusty environment, cleaning only its surface. Why? Lays something remains within it unnoticed, continuing to exist in close contact with the skin. Today, such a situation would be addressed quickly. In this setting, it was part of the routine. The belief that supported the use of wigs remained unchanged. Appearance defined reality. If the wig looked clean, then it was clean. The presence of anything beyond that was not considered because it was not visible. The illusion remained complete. Over time, the conditions within the wig allowed these organisms to multiply. The environment supported them. The repeated use reinforced their presence. What began as a small unseen element could become something more persistent, something that remained close to the body without ever being acknowledged directly. The contact between the wig and the skin allowed this presence to extend beyond the material itself. The body, already exposed in other ways, became part of the same environment. The separation between what was worn and what was experienced became less distinct. The two interacted continuously without interruption. The longer this continued, the more stable the system appeared from the outside. The wig remained in place. The pharaoh's image remained intact. Nothing suggested an imbalance. The system functioned exactly as it was designed to function, maintaining the illusion without change. What makes this particularly unsettling is how completely the illusion replaced the need for observation. The presence of movement within the wig did not alter the process. It did not interrupt the ritual. It existed alongside it, unseen, unacknowledged, and unchanged by the routine that surrounded it. From the outside, everything remained controlled. The pharaoh's head was covered, his appearance complete, his presence consistent, the illusion held, supported by layers that concealed more than they revealed. And yet, beneath that surface, the interaction between the body and what lived within the wig continued quietly. The process did not stop. It continued, shaped by heat, by accumulation, and by the absence of deeper attention. Hidden within the fibers of the wig, small organisms found a place to remain, multiplying in the warmth, while the outer surface stayed controlled and unchanged. This contrast turned refinement into concealment, allowing something alive to exist where nothing was meant to move at all. The next stage carried its own form of pressure, as harsh substances were used directly on the skin in the name of purification, pushing the body further beyond its natural limits. Ritual purification did not end with water or fragrance. It extended into the use of substances that were believed to cleanse more deeply, to remove what could not be seen, and to restore a sense of order that simple washing could not achieve. These materials were prepared with intention, measured carefully, and applied as part of a process that carried meaning beyond their physical effect. Servants handled them with the same precision as every other element of the ritual, aware that their role was to maintain a practice that had long been accepted. The substances themselves varied, but their purpose remained consistent. They were meant to purify, to cleanse the body in a way that aligned with belief rather than observation. When applied to the skin, they created a sensation that was immediate and unmistakable. There was a sharpness to them, a reaction that could not be ignored. Yet, this reaction was not seen as a warning. It was interpreted as proof that the substance was working. The process followed a familiar pattern. The body, already prepared through previous steps, was exposed again, this time to materials that interacted with the skin more directly. These substances did not sit lightly on the surface. They altered it, even if only for a moment. The sensation they created became part of the experience, part of what defined the ritual itself. From a distance, the result appeared controlled. The body remained composed. The ritual continued without interruption, and the image of purity was reinforced. Nothing in that image suggested harm. The system functioned as expected, maintaining the appearance that everything was being managed correctly. But the nature of these substances made their effect more complex. The skin, already affected by repeated treatments, responded to them in ways that were not always visible immediately. Areas that had been exposed through shaving or covered by layers of oil and other materials now came into contact with something more aggressive. The reaction could be subtle at first, but it did not remain isolated. The belief behind this practice gave it strength. Purification was not simply a physical act. It was tied to a larger idea, something that extended beyond the body itself. If a substance was believed to cleanse, then its effect was accepted, even if the body responded differently. The meaning of the ritual overrode the experience of the skin. Servants continued their work without hesitation. Their role was to apply, to maintain, to ensure that the ritual was completed exactly as it had always been. The substances were used in the same way each time, their presence reinforcing the structure of the process. There was no adjustment based on what the body might have indicated. The ritual defined the outcome. It is difficult not to feel a sense of quiet tension when imagining how this would have felt over time. The skin, already exposed and layered, was now subjected to materials that could intensify its condition. The body was not given space to recover fully. Each step followed the last, creating a sequence that did not pause. If we compare this to modern understanding, it would be like applying strong chemical substances directly onto sensitive skin repeatedly, trusting the process because it is believed to cleanse even as the skin reacts in ways that suggest otherwise. Today, such a reaction would be considered a sign to stop. In this setting, it confirmed that the process was working. The repetition of this ritual created a pattern that was difficult to break. Each application reinforced the belief that purification was being achieved. The body adapted to the process, carrying its effects, while the appearance remained unchanged. The illusion of control remained intact, supported by actions that were repeated without question. Over time, the difference between what was experienced and what was believed became more pronounced. The skin could show signs of irritation beneath the surface. Yet the ritual continued. The meaning of the act remained stronger than the response of the body. The system did not shift to accommodate the condition. It remained fixed. The more this process was repeated, the more it became part of what defined cleanliness itself. The use of these substances was not seen as excessive. It was seen as necessary. The ritual required it, and the ritual defined what was correct. What makes this particularly unsettling is how completely the belief shaped the practice. The body's response did not alter the method. The substances continued to be used, applied in the same way, producing the same visible result. The illusion held even as the underlying condition changed. From the outside, everything remained controlled. The pharaoh appeared composed, his body prepared, his presence aligned with expectation. Nothing suggested an imbalance. The system worked as it was designed to work, maintaining the image without interruption. And yet, beneath that surface, the interaction between the skin and these substances continued, quietly altering what could not be seen. The process did not stop. It continued, shaped by belief, by repetition, and by the absence of deeper consideration. Harsh substances used for purification created a visible sense of cleansing, while quietly affecting the skin beneath, allowing irritation to develop without disrupting the ritual. This contrast turned belief into something that could override physical response, maintaining the illusion even as the body reacted. A quieter pattern followed where scent and surface were used again to conceal what remained unresolved, masking deeper conditions instead of addressing them directly. Control of scent became the final measure of cleanliness, not because it addressed the body itself, but because it shaped how the body was perceived by others. Servants prepared oils, resins, and aromatic substances in advance, layering them carefully over the skin, into the hair, and onto the fabrics that surrounded the pharaoh. Each application was deliberate, designed to replace what the body naturally produced with something that could be controlled. From a distance, the result was immediate. The air shifted, filled with fragrance, and the presence of that fragrance suggested that everything was as it should be. The logic behind this practice was simple and consistent. If an unpleasant scent could not be detected, then it did not exist. The absence of odor became proof of cleanliness, even if the cause of that odor remained unchanged. This idea shaped the entire approach. The body was not adjusted at its source. It was covered, corrected on the surface, and presented in a way that removed any visible sign of imbalance. At first, the effect seemed effective. The strong scent of oils and perfumes dominated the surrounding space, masking anything beneath it. The pharaoh appeared refined, controlled, untouched by the conditions that affected others. His presence aligned perfectly with the expectation of purity, and nothing in that image suggested otherwise. But the body itself continued its natural processes. Heat remained constant, and with it, the body continued to produce what it always had. The difference was that this production was no longer addressed directly. It was layered over, hidden beneath substances that replaced its presence rather than removing it. Over time, this created a surface that carried multiple layers at once, oils, wax, and fragrances combined, forming a mixture that settled onto the skin and remained there. Each new application added to what was already present, creating a structure that became more complex. With repetition, the body was no longer simply treated. It was covered continuously, with each layer concealing what lay beneath. Servants maintained this process without hesitation. Their role was to ensure that the scent remained strong, that the surface remained controlled, and that the illusion remained intact. If the fragrance faded, it was restored. If it seemed insufficient, it was reinforced. The process did not change, based on what the body might have required. It followed the same pattern, repeated again and again. It is difficult not to feel a sense of quiet tension when imagining how this would have developed over time. The body, already exposed to heat and repeated treatments, was now enclosed within layers that did not allow it to return to its natural state. The scent that surrounded it did not remove what was present. It replaced it, creating a version of reality that was easier to accept. If we compare this to modern experience, it would be like applying a strong fragrance over the body, repeatedly, without addressing the cause of odor, trusting the surface effect, while the underlying condition continues unchanged. Today, such a pattern would be recognized quickly. In this setting, it was normalized. The belief behind this practice reinforced its continuation. Fragrance was associated with purity, and purity was associated with control. If the scent remained pleasant, then the body was considered clean. The presence of that scent replaced the need to investigate further. The illusion became the standard. Over time, the difference between appearance and condition became more pronounced. The surface improved. The scent remained controlled. But the body beneath continued to carry the effects of everything that had been applied to it. The layers did not disappear. They accumulated, interacting with one another, creating a condition that was not immediately visible. The more this process was repeated, the more dependent the system became on maintaining it. Any pause would allow the natural scent of the body to return, breaking the illusion that had been carefully constructed. So the routine continued, reinforced by expectation, supported by belief. What makes this particularly unsettling is how completely the surface replaced the need for deeper understanding. The body was treated as something that could be corrected through appearance alone. The idea that the cause might need to be addressed did not shape the process. The result, as long as it appeared correct, was enough. From the outside, everything remained controlled. The pharaoh moved through spaces surrounded by a consistent scent, his presence refined, his image intact. Nothing suggested an imbalance. The system worked as it was designed to work, maintaining the illusion without interruption. And yet beneath that surface, the body continued to exist in its natural state, influenced by heat, by accumulation, and by the repeated application of substances that did not remove what they covered. The process did not stop. It continued, shaped by repetition and by the absence of deeper attention. The longer this continued, the wider the gap became between what was seen and what was experienced. The ritual maintained the image, but it did not resolve the condition beneath it. The illusion remained strong, even as the reality became more complex. Fragrance replaced the natural signals of the body, creating the impression of cleanliness while allowing the underlying condition to remain unchanged and accumulate over time. This substitution turned surface control into a mask that hid what continued to develop beneath it. Surrounding conditions added another layer of pressure, as even the spaces around the pharaoh carried heat, dust, and unseen elements that continued to affect the body, despite every effort to control it. Order filled the interior of the palace, shaping every surface into something that appeared controlled, measured, and untouched by disorder. Floors were swept, walls remained clear, and objects were arranged with intention. Servants moved quietly through these spaces, maintaining what could be seen, correcting anything that disrupted the expected appearance. From a distance, the environment suggested stability. It appeared separate from the outside world, protected from the conditions that shaped everything beyond its walls. The contrast between inside and outside was carefully maintained. Within the palace, light reflected cleanly across surfaces, and movement followed a pattern that reinforced the sense of control. Outside, the environment followed a different rhythm. Heat remained constant, pressing against the structure, settling into every open space. Dust moved freely, carried by the air, reaching places that could not be fully sealed. The palace did not exist in isolation. It stood within that environment, connected to it through openings, through movement, and through the materials that passed between them. What existed outside did not remain outside. It entered gradually, carried by air, by objects, and by the routines that connected the two spaces. At first, this interaction was subtle. Fine particles settled onto surfaces barely visible, unless closely observed. They were removed as part of the routine, swept away, wiped down, and replaced by the appearance of cleanliness. The process worked on what could be seen. It restored the surface quickly, maintaining the illusion that the environment remained unchanged. But what could not be seen followed a different pattern. The air carried more than dust. It carried organisms that moved within it, settling onto surfaces, remaining in places where they could not be easily removed. These elements did not disappear when the visible surface was cleaned. They remained, shaped by conditions that were not fully controlled. The heat within the environment intensified this effect. Warmth remained constant, creating conditions where these unseen elements could persist. Surfaces that appeared clean could still carry what had settled onto them. The routine addressed what was visible, but it did not alter what existed beyond sight. Servants continued their work with precision. Their actions were focused on maintaining order, restoring surfaces, and ensuring that the environment aligned with expectations. The process was consistent. It followed the same pattern each day, reinforcing the appearance of cleanliness. The possibility that something remained beyond that surface did not change the method. The pharaoh moved within this space, surrounded by what appeared to be control. His body already shaped by ritual, came into contact with an environment that was not entirely separate from the conditions outside. The surfaces he touched, the air he moved through, all carried elements that were part of a larger system. It is difficult not to feel a sense of quiet tension when imagining how this environment functioned over time. The palace appeared clean, yet it was connected to conditions that could not be fully controlled. The body already exposed through repeated rituals remained within this space, interacting with it continuously. If we compare this to modern experience, it would be like maintaining a spotless interior, while the surrounding environment carries contaminants that enter gradually settling onto surfaces and remaining despite regular cleaning. Today, such a situation would be addressed through methods that go beyond what can be seen. In this setting, it was managed through appearance. The belief that supported this system remained consistent. Clean surfaces meant a clean environment. If the floor was clear, if the objects were arranged, and if no visible sign of disorder remained, then the space was considered controlled. The presence of unseen elements did not alter that conclusion. Over time, this created a gap between what was presented and what existed. The environment appeared stable, yet it carried influences that were not part of the visible structure. The routine maintained the surface, but it did not isolate the space from what surrounded it. The more this process was repeated, the more stable the illusion became. Each day reinforced the same appearance. Each action restored what could be seen. The system functioned as expected, maintaining the image of control without interruption. What makes this particularly unsettling is how completely the visible replaced the need to consider what lay beyond it. The environment was judged by its surface. The deeper conditions were not part of the process. The illusion held because it was never challenged directly. From the outside, everything remained consistent. The pharaoh moved through spaces that appeared clean, ordered, and separate from the conditions beyond them. His presence remained controlled, his image intact. The system worked as it was designed to work, And yet, beneath that surface, the interaction between the environment and the body continued quietly. The process did not stop. It continued. It achieved by heat, by movement, and by the elements carried within the air itself. The longer this continued, the more the body remained connected to an environment that was not fully controlled. The rituals maintained the image, but they did not fully separate the body from what surrounded it. The illusion remained strong, even as the reality became more complex. Controlled interiors created the impression of a clean and protected space. Yet, the surrounding environment continued to introduce unseen elements that settled onto every surface and remained beyond easy removal. This contrast allowed the appearance of order to mask the presence of what could not be seen, maintaining the illusion, while conditions beneath it persisted. A deeper contradiction followed, where even a body that appeared perfectly clean could still carry illness within it, hidden behind every visible sign of control. Perfection was visible at every level of the pharaoh's appearance, from the smoothness of the skin to the controlled scent that surrounded him, from the precision of his movements to the order of the space he occupied. Everything aligned to suggest a body that was untouched by weakness, a presence that existed beyond the ordinary conditions of human life. The rituals that shaped this image were repeated without interruption, reinforcing the same result each day. From a distance, nothing seemed out of place. The image was complete. The surface told a clear story. The body appeared clean, maintained, and controlled. The layers of preparation, each one carefully applied, created a version of the pharaoh that others could observe and accept without question. His presence suggested stability, consistency, and a form of purity that extended beyond the physical. There was no visible sign that anything beneath that surface might be different, but the body itself did not follow the same rule. Lays as the image that represented it, it continued to function according to its own processes, influenced by conditions that were not always visible or understood. Heat, exposure, repeated treatments, and contact with the environment all shaped its internal state in ways that could not be seen directly. These processes did not stop when the ritual ended. They continued quietly beneath the surface. The contrast between what was visible and what was experienced created a gap that was not easily recognized. The rituals addressed what could be seen. They corrected the surface, maintained the image, and reinforced the illusion. But they did not reach beneath that surface in a way that could fully align the body with the image it presented. Servants maintained the routine without hesitation. Their role was to preserve the appearance to ensure that the pharaoh remained consistent in the eyes of others. They adjusted what could be adjusted, applied what needed to be applied, and repeated each step with precision. The success of their work was measured by what could be observed. If the image remained intact, then the process was considered successful. The body, however, carried its own condition forward. Small changes developed over time, influenced by the accumulation of earlier steps. Irritation, exposure, and contact with substances and environments created effects that were not always visible from the outside. These changes did not interrupt the ritual. They remained beneath it, hidden by the layers that had been applied. It is difficult not to feel a sense of quiet unease when imagining how this would have unfolded over time. The pharaoh appeared untouched by discomfort, yet the body beneath that appearance continued to respond to everything it had been subjected to. The difference between appearance and condition grew gradually, shaped by repetition and reinforced by Bailey. If we compare this to modern experience, it would be like presenting a perfectly controlled image while the body itself continues to experience conditions that are not reflected in that image. Today, such a difference would be examined and addressed. In this setting, it remained part of the system. The belief that supported this structure made the contrast possible. Appearance defined reality. If the pharaoh looked healthy, then he was considered healthy. The presence of illness did not alter that perception unless it became visible. As long as it remained beneath the surface, it did not disrupt the illusion. Over time, this created a separation between what was known and what was shown. The body carried conditions that were not part of the visible image. The rituals maintained the surface, but they did not fully account for what developed beneath it. The system remained stable, even as the reality it represented became more complex. The more the rituals were repeated, the stronger the illusion became. Each day reinforced the same appearance. Each step restored the surface. The image remained consistent, and that consistency became proof that everything was under control. The possibility of difference was not part of the process. What makes this particularly unsettling is how completely the illusion replaced direct observation. The body was not evaluated for its condition. It was evaluated on its appearance. The difference between the two was not ignored, but it was not addressed. It existed quietly beneath the surface, without interrupting the system that maintained the image. From the outside, everything remained unchanged. From the outside, everything remained unchanged. The pharaoh moved through spaces with the same controlled presence, the same refined appearance, the same sense of stability. Nothing suggested an imbalance. The system functioned exactly as it was designed to function. And yet, beneath that surf, the body continued to carry the effects of everything it had experienced. The process did not stop. It continued, shaped by exposure, by repetition, and by the absence of deeper attention. The rituals maintained the image, but they did not fully align it with the condition beneath it. The longer this continued, the more the difference between appearance and reality became part of the system itself. The illusion was not broken. It was sustained even as the body followed its own course beneath it. A flawless appearance concealed a body that continued to carry unseen conditions, allowing illness to exist quietly beneath layers of control and presentation. This separation turned visibility into the only measure of health, leaving deeper realities unaddressed. Control shifted further outward as even the act of maintaining cleanliness was placed into the hands of others, reducing direct awareness of what the body itself required. Control over the body did not belong entirely to the pharaoh, even though his appearance suggested otherwise. Every step of preparation, from washing to shaving, from applying oils to adjusting linen, was carried out by others. Servants surrounded him, each assigned to a specific task, each trained to perform it with precision. Their movements were quiet, deliberate, and consistent. From a distance, the system appeared efficient, a seamless process where every detail was managed without interruption. The pharaoh himself remained at the center of this structure, but he was not the one directing each action in the moment. The routine followed a pattern that had been established long before, repeated without change, reinforced through practice and expectation. The body became something that was worked on, adjusted, and prepared, rather than something that acted for itself. At first, this arrangement seemed to offer an advantage. The presence of any hands ensured that every detail was addressed. No step was overlooked. The process moved smoothly, each action following the last without hesitation. The pharaoh did not need to concern himself with the complexity of the ritual. It was handled for him, maintained by those who had been trained to execute it correctly. But this separation introduced a different kind of distance. The body was no longer directly connected to the decisions that affected it. Sensations that might have indicated discomfort or imbalance did not necessarily alter the process. The servants followed the routine as it had been defined, not as it might have been needed in that moment. The pharaoh's role within this system was to remain still, to allow the process to unfold, to maintain composure as each step was completed. Any reaction that suggested discomfort would disrupt the image that the ritual was meant to create. Control in this sense was not about adjusting the process. It was about maintaining the appearance of stability while the process continued unchanged. Servants worked according to what they had been taught. Their understanding of the body was shaped by the ritual itself. If a step required repetition, it was repeated. If a substance was meant to be applied, it was applied. The process did not shift based on individual response. It remained fixed, guided by tradition rather than observation. This created a situation where the body's condition and the ritual's execution did not always align. The skin, already affected by repeated treatments, continued to be handled in the same way. The materials used were applied as expected. The sequence did not change. The body adapted as it could, carrying the effects forward without altering the process that produced them. It is difficult not to feel a sense of quiet unease when imagining how this would have developed over time. The pharaoh appeared to be in complete control, yet the actions that shaped his body were carried out by others, following a structure that did not adjust easily. The connection between sensation and response was weakened, replaced by a system that prioritized consistency. If we compare this to modern experience, it would be like having every aspect of personal care handled by others according to a fixed routine, without the ability to adjust based on how the body feels or responds. Today, such a lack of direct awareness would be considered a limitation. In this setting, it was part of the structure. The belief that supported this system reinforced its continuation. The ritual defined what was correct. The servants ensured that it was followed. The pharaoh embodied the result. Each role was clear, and each part of the system supported the others. The process functioned as intended, maintaining the image that was required. Over time, this arrangement reduced the direct relationship between the body and its own care. The pharaoh did not need to interpret what he felt. The system interpreted it for him, or more precisely, it continued regardless of it. The ritual moved forward, supported by repetition and expectation. The more this process was repeated, the more stable it appeared. Each day followed the same pattern. Each step produced the same visible result. The image remained consistent, and that consistency reinforced the belief that everything was under control. Everything was under control. The system did not need to change because it appeared to be working. What makes this particularly unsettling is how completely control was redefined. It was no longer about direct awareness or adjustment. It was about maintaining a structure that produced a consistent image. The body was part of that structure, shaped by it, but not fully in command of it. From the outside, everything remained unchanged. The pharaoh appeared composed, his presence controlled, his body prepared according to expectation. Nothing suggested an imbalance. The system functioned exactly as it was designed to function. And yet, beneath that surface, the body continued to respond to everything that had been done to it, carrying the effects forward without directly influencing the process that produced them. The ritual maintained the image, but it did not fully account for the condition beneath it. The longer this continued, the more the separation between control and experience became part of the system itself. The illusion of complete authority remained even as the actual interaction with the body was mediated by others. The process did not stop. It continued, shaped by structure, by repetition, and by the absence of direct adjustment. Delegated care created the impression of perfect control. Yet it separated the body from the decisions that shaped it, allowing routines to continue without direct awareness of their effects. This distance turned consistency into a substitute for understanding, maintaining the image while reducing the ability to respond to what lay beneath it. Final control appeared only at the end, where even death would preserve the illusion, sealing the body into a state that hid everything it had carried while alive. Preservation did not begin with decay. It began with control, extending the same logic that had shaped the pharaoh's body in life into the moment after death. The body was not allowed to return to a natural state. It was prepared again, adjusted, and transformed through a process that aimed to maintain its appearance long after life had ended. Servants and specialists moved with the same quiet precision, treating the body not as something that had changed, but as something that still required refinement. The environment surrounding this process remained controlled. The body was placed within a space where each step could be carried out without interruption. Materials were arranged carefully, tools prepared, and substances measured. From a distance, it appeared similar to the rituals of daily preparation, structured, deliberate, and focused on the surface. The difference was not in the method, but in the condition of the body itself. The difference was not in the method, but in the condition of the body itself. The goal of this process was not restoration, but preservation. The body had to remain recognizable, intact, and aligned with the image that had been maintained in life. Any sign of change that suggested decay or weakness had to be removed or concealed. The process moved step by step, each action reinforcing the same objective that had guided every ritual before it. At first, the effect was immediate. The body was treated in ways that altered its condition, removing elements that were no longer considered part of the ideal form. Substances were applied to stabilize what remained, to prevent visible change, to maintain the structure that defined the pharaoh's appearance. The surface was prepared again, shaped into something that could endure. From the outside, the result appeared controlled. The body did not show the signs that might have been expected. It remained composed, its form preserved, its presence aligned with the image that others recognized. The illusion extended beyond life, creating a continuity that suggested nothing had changed. But beneath that surface, the reality was different. The process did not restore what had existed before. It transformed the body into something else, something that no longer followed the same conditions. The preservation focused on what could be seen, just as it had in life. The deeper condition of the body was not part of what was maintained. The methods used to achieve this preservation introduced their own effects. Substances applied to the body interacted with what remained, altering its structure in ways that were not visible from the outside. The body was no longer active, yet it continued to carry the results of everything that had been done to it. The process did not erase the past. It sealed it beneath a controlled surface. Servants followed the procedure without hesitation. Their role was to complete the process exactly as it had been defined, ensuring that the body met the expected standard. The ritual did not adapt to the condition of the body. It applied the same principles, the same methods, the same focus on appearance that had guided every step before. It is difficult not to feel a sense of quiet unease when imagining how this would have unfolded. The body, no longer capable of response, was shaped once more into an image that others could accept. The process continued without interruption, maintaining control even in the absence of life. If we compare this to modern understanding, it would be like preserving the outward appearance of a body while concealing the conditions that existed within it, creating a version that looks stable but does not reflect its true state. Today, such a process would be understood differently. In this setting, it was part of the system. The belief behind this practice reinforced its continuation. The body had to remain aligned with its image, even after death. The preservation of form was not just a physical act. It was a continuation of identity. The appearance defined what remained just as it had in life. Over time, this process created a final separation between appearance and reality. The body that remained was not the same as the body that had lived, yet it was presented as if it were. The illusion was complete. It extended beyond life, maintained through methods that focused entirely on the surface. The more this process was repeated across generations, the more stable it appeared. Birai. Tool became part of what defined continuity. The body was preserved, the image maintained, the system reinforced. Nothing in that sequence suggested contradiction. The illusion held without interruption. What makes this particularly unsettling is how completely the surface replaced the need to acknowledge what had existed beneath it. The preservation did not reveal the body's condition. It concealed it, maintaining the image while removing any sign of what had been carried during life. From the outside, everything remained controlled. The pharaoh's body appeared intact, its form preserved, its presence consistent with what had been known before. The system functioned exactly as it was designed to function, extending the illusion beyond its original limits. And yet, beneath that surface, the body carried the final result of everything that had been done to it. The process did not erase those effects. It sealed them, fixed them in place, hidden beneath layers that could not be easily undone. The longer this remained, the more complete the illusion became. The preserved body stood as a representation, not of the condition it had carried, but of the image it had been required to maintain. The system reached its final form, maintaining control, even where control no longer had meaning. Preservation extended the illusion of cleanliness beyond life, sealing the body into a form that concealed everything it had carried while alive. This final step turned control into permanence, fixing the image while hiding the reality beneath it. One conclusion remained where all of these rituals revealed not perfection but a carefully constructed illusion that had never truly reflected the condition of the body at all. Everything that has been carefully prepared, adjusted, and repeated throughout the rituals of the pharaoh leads to a single quiet conclusion that does not appear immediately. Yut becomes clearer the longer one looks beneath the surface. What seemed at first like discipline, refinement, and control reveals itself instead as a system built around appearance. A structure designed to shape how the body is seen rather than how it truly exists. Each step from washing to shaving, from layering oils to applying fragrance, from covering the skin to preserving it after death, has followed the same pattern. The surface is corrected. The image is maintained. The deeper condition remains largely untouched. The rituals did not fail in their purpose. They succeeded in creating a consistent appearance, one that aligned with belief, expectation, and power. The pharaoh appeared clean. He appeared controlled. He appeared separate from the ordinary conditions that defined the lives of others. That appearance was strong enough to hold, reinforced by repetition, and supported by every layer that was added to the body. It was convincing, and it was complete, at least from a distance. But the body itself followed a different path, one that could not be fully shaped by these rituals. It responded to heat, to exposure, to substances that were applied to it, and to conditions that were never fully addressed. It carried the effects of each step quietly beneath the layers that concealed them. The more the rituals were repeated, the more this separation between appearance and condition became part of the system itself. This contrast is not loud. It does not announce itself. It exists in small details, in the gradual accumulation of what is not removed, in the subtle changes that are not immediately visible. It exists in the difference between what is presented and what is experienced, between what is seen and what is carried beneath the surface. The illusion does not break easily because it is not meant to be examined closely. What makes this realization more unsettling is how familiar it begins to feel when viewed from a distance. The idea that appearance can replace reality is not limited to one time or one place. It is a pattern that can exist wherever control over the surface becomes more important than understanding what lies beneath it. The pharaoh's rituals make this pattern visible in a way that is both quiet and persistent. The body throughout all of this was never truly neglected. It was constantly attended to, constantly adjusted, constantly shaped by careful hands and deliberate actions. But attention is not the same as understanding, and control is not the same as care. The rituals created a version of cleanliness that could be seen, but they did not always support the condition of the body itself. It is easy to imagine the scene as it would have appeared to those who witnessed it. The pharaoh standing in perfect composure, his skin smooth, his scent controlled, his clothing flawless, his presence untouched by anything that suggested imperfection. Everything aligned to create a single impression, one that left little room for doubt. The system worked exactly as it was designed to work. And yet, beneath that impression, the body carried its own reality, shaped by everything that had been done to it. The oils that sealed the skin, the wax that melted across it, the substances that settled into it, the water that introduced what could not be seen, the tools that connected one moment to the next, the environment that remained just beyond control. All of these elements continue to influence the body in ways that the rituals did not fully address. The final act of preservation does not resolve this difference. It completes it. The body is fixed into a state that reflects the image it was required to maintain while everything it carried remains sealed beneath that surface. The illusion becomes permanent not because it has been woven true, but because it can no longer be changed. Understanding this does not require judgment. It requires observation, a willingness to look beyond what is presented, and to consider what might exist beneath it. The rituals of the pharaoh are not unusual because they are extreme. They are revealing because they make visible a pattern that is often hidden in quieter ways. As you reflect on this, the image of perfection begins to shift slightly. It becomes less certain, less complete, more layered. What once appeared simple now carries complexity. What once seemed controlled now reveals the limits of that control. The difference between appearance and reality becomes something that cannot be easily ignored. Now, as the story settles and the details fade into stillness, you can allow yourself to step away from the image and rest in the quiet understanding that not everything needs to appear perfect to exist as it is. The body in all its complexity does not require constant correction to be real. It simply continues whether it is observed or not. So as you close your eyes, let the image dissolve slowly, the layers of control falling away one by one, leaving only a calm sense of distance between what is seen and what is understood. Let your breathing settle into a steady rhythm, soft and even, untouched by the need to adjust or refine. The world beyond this moment can remain as it is, while you rest within a quieter space. And as the final thought passes gently through your mind, allow it to soften and fade, leaving behind only stillness as you drift into rest, knowing that nothing here needs to be held any longer. A final reflection. What the surface cannot tell, and so, dear friend, we come to the end of this quiet journey through the hidden world of the pharaoh's rituals. But before we let the last images fade completely, it is worth pausing for a moment longer, not to examine, but to simply sit with what we have seen. For in all these layers of oil and perfume, in all these repeated acts of washing and covering, there is something that reaches far beyond ancient Egypt. There is a question that lingers, soft as linen, persistent as dust. What is it that we try so hard to hide? And what happens when we succeed so completely that even we no longer remember what lies beneath? The pharaoh's body was shaped each day into a flawless surface. His skin was smoothed, his scent controlled, his hair replaced with perfect forms, his breath masked, his linen bright. From a distance he appeared untouched by time, by heat, by the ordinary decay that visits every human life. But we have seen that the surface was not the whole truth. Beneath it, the body continued its quiet work, responding to irritation, accumulating what was not removed, carrying the weight of constant correction. The rituals did not fail. They simply could not reach far enough. The body, in its quiet persistence, remained something that could not be entirely shaped by will. It is tempting, from our modern distance, to smile at these ancient practices, to marvel at the elaborate wigs, the melting wax, the melting wax, the melting wax, the melting wax, the melting wax. But if we are honest, we must ask ourselves, have we really left this pattern behind? Do we not also build layers between ourselves and the world, hoping that the surface we present will be accepted as the whole truth? We style and smooth, we mask and conceal. We curate images that we hope will be seen as effortless perfection. And sometimes, in the quiet of our own rooms, we feel the gap between what is shown and what is felt. There is nothing wrong with wanting to be clean. There is nothing wrong with caring for how we appear. But when the care for appearance becomes a wall that separates us from our own bodies, something shifts. The pride's body is not an enemy to be corrected. It is not a rough draft to be polished into submission. It is the place where we live. Every sensation, every subtle change, every quiet signal it sends. To listen to it is not a weakness. To let it be seen, even with its imperfections, is not a failure. Perhaps the pharaoh's rituals are a mirror held up to a longing that is still with us, the longing to be flawless, to be beyond the reach of time and need, to be seen as complete and untouchable. And perhaps the deeper truth that emerges from all those layers is that such perfection is not possible. Not because we lack the skill, but because it is not the purpose of being alive. To be alive is to change. To be alive is to carry the marks of the sun, the dust of the air, the warmth of our own breath. To be alive is to be real, and reality is never a single smooth surface. As you settle deeper into the stillness of this night, you might let the image of the pharaoh dissolve gently. See the layers fall away, the oils, the powders, the carefully folded linen. See the body beneath, not as a failure of control, but as something that was always doing its own work, quietly, faithfully, without needing to be perfect. Feel your own body in this moment, the weight of it against the chair or the bed, the rise and fall of your breath, the subtle warmth beneath your skin. It does not need to be corrected. It is not a problem to be solved. It is simply here, with you, holding the story of your own quiet persistence. And perhaps that is the final lesson of these ancient rituals, that the truest cleanliness is not a surface without flaw, but a relationship without pretense. To know what your body needs, to listen when it speaks, to allow it the rest and honesty it deserves. This is a kind of care that no oil can imitate and no linen can conceal. It is the care that asks nothing of the surface, except that it be honest. It is the care that does not fear the natural scent of being alive, the soft evidence of time, the gentle marks that prove we have lived. Now, let all of this go. Let the images of the palace, The servants, the slow rituals of preparation fade like heat rising from the Nile at dawn. Let the sound soften into silence. Let the last traces of fragrance drift away on a breeze that is no longer felt. There is nothing more to hold. There is nothing more to fix. You are here, in the quiet of this moment, breathing easily, resting without effort. The world outside is still, and within you there is a stillness that needs no name. Whatever has been carried through the day, whatever small tensions gathered in your shoulders or your mind, let them loosen now, thread by thread. You do not need to manage anything. You do not need to be anything other than what you are, in this breath, in this space. And so, as the night wraps itself softly around you, I leave you with this simple wish. May you rest in the truth of your own body, untroubled by the need to appear. May you sleep as the river sleeps, deep, steady, carrying all that it has gathered without effort. May you wake in the morning with the quiet confidence of one who knows that the surface is not the whole story, and that what is real does not need to be perfect. Good night, dear friend. Rest well. And when you wake, may the day meet you with kindness, and may you meet it with the same honest, gentle presence you have carried through this journey. And perhaps, in the stillness of this night, we can let the last layer fall away, not with effort, but with the soft release of something that was never ours to hold so tightly. The pharaoh's body was prepared each day as if it were a temple, and in a way it was. But a temple is not made perfect by covering its stones with gold. A temple is made sacred by what it holds. Lands and silence, the prayers whispered in its hollows, the light that finds its way through cracks, the feet that have worn smooth its thresholds. The body, too, is a kind of temple, and like any temple, it does not need to be flawless to be holy. We have walked through rooms heavy with fragrance, watched as servants applied layer after layer, witnessed the slow accumulation of substances meant to conceal what the body simply was. And in all that careful work, simply was. And in all that careful work, we have seen something that might feel familiar, the desire to be seen as complete, to offer a surface that leaves no room for question, to stand before the world as though we have never been touched by heat or dust or time. It is a desire that crosses centuries. It is a desire that visits us still, in the quiet moments before we step into a room full of eyes, in the long hours we spend shaping an image that we hope will be enough. But the deeper truth, the one that the pharaoh's rituals could never quite reach, is that the body does not need to be hidden to be worthy. The marks it carries are not failures. The scent it produces is not an offense. The slow changes that visit it with each passing season are not mistakes to be corrected. They are the language of a life being lived. And a life being lived is not meant to be flawless. It is meant to be real. So as you let go of these ancient images, let them remind you of something gentle. The next time you wash your face, you might not need to layer anything over it. The next time you catch your reflection, you might not need to correct it. The next time you feel the weight of your own ordinary body, you might simply rest in it, knowing that it has carried you through every day you have ever known, and it has done so without ever asking to be perfect. You are not a surface to be polished. You are not an image to be maintained. You are the one who breathes in the key out of this room, the one who has traveled through this story and is now letting it go. And that is enough. More than enough. So let the last scent fade. Let the linen fall. Let the silence gather around you like a hand that holds nothing but the present moment. You have come to the present moment. You have come to the end of this journey, and there is nothing left to arrange. Good night, and rest.